Chapter 11:20. Pain, pain, pain. There was nothing but pain. The pain that came from all over her body made Xianxia feel as if her brain was going to melt from the pain. How long had it been since she experienced such pain? It seemed like she had never felt such pain since she came of age, other than from her father. Today there was finally a mortal name added to the list of people she hated. Duke Marcus. She was obviously very angry at being tricked, angry at being fooled, angry at being provoked. All of the anger accumulated together, making her angry like an erupting volcano. But when two of her teeth were smashed by a pillar, she suddenly became a little more clear-headed. She felt that a little dwarf would be sent flying with a single slap, but when she slapped with her claws, it was as if she had slapped a pile of hard thorium ore. A guy emitting golden light was actually able to use a blazing hot divine sword to block her sweeping dragon tail. Who is he? Who is he? It was a kind of daze where even her thoughts were sluggish. Often after her moves were blocked, it would take a few seconds before Xianxia realized who had blocked her powerful attack. It was the famous master of the Iron Furnace Fort, Magni Bronzebeard. It was the famous deputy commander of the Alliance, Turalian, who wielded the divine sword, Quell Zarum. It was fine if it was these famous strong people in the Alliance, but there were some people who she could not even name who also caused her a considerable degree of pain. The three thieves moved like the wind, quickly brushing past her ribs and back at high speed. Every time a light touch like a dragonfly touching the surface of the water came less than a second later, it would be followed by an intense pain. Vanessa, Edwin, and Valera, who were wielding magnificent weapons, were like butchers dismembering an ox, cutting off her dragon scales one by one with their daggers. In the next moment, there would be 3 or 4 arrows filled with the power of nature shooting into her body through the wound, aggravating her injuries. That wound seemed to have become a new target, attracting the attacks of the mages. Then from the wound, the surging magical elements could ignore the magic resistance of her dragon scales and dragon skin, directly causing damage in her body. After several rounds of continuous attacks, Xianxia felt that her incomparably strong body was gradually losing feeling. The sense of crisis in her heart grew stronger and stronger. It was only at this moment that Xianxia realized how serious the situation was. A true mortal expert had long surpassed her understanding. This was not her fault. After all, with her status as a countess, she usually only saw the stronger Bolvar. She didn't realize that after killing so many demon lords and harvesting so many spoils of war, the experts of the Alliance and the Horde had long since changed their equipment. Each of them was wearing extremely luxurious equipment in this era. These big shots of the Alliance definitely had the ability to kill her on the spot. What made her even more disappointed was that Duque still hadn't sent in all his experts. There were only 20 people fighting. They were divided into 4 groups of 5 and surrounded her from all 4 directions. Including Dooku, there were a total of 2 teams that stood further away. What a vigorous life force! Mograine, who was in charge of support and had yet to step forward, exclaimed. Duque pursed his lips. Isn't that so? I took the opportunity to stab her in the chest, but only took away 20% of her life force. Dragons are indeed a combat race specially created by the Titans of creation. In Duque's vision, the battle had only started for slightly more than a minute, and the system indicated that Xianxia's life force was only left with 67%. William, who was now Lagash, came over with the 2 one-handed swords that Jaina had given him. Lord Marcus, when do I go up? Duque looked at the berserk version of William, who still had partial memory loss. When she flies into the sky, it'll be your turn. Duque turned to everyone and shouted, be careful of her, deep breath, in the sky. On the other side, Xianxia was stunned when she heard this. Deep breath? Am I using my full dragon breath? How does he know that I want to fly into the sky to take care of them? Is Duque really omniscient and prophetic like the rumors say? Xianxia suddenly felt a chill in her heart. If that's really the case, what's the point of fighting? The next moment she changed her mind. She was indignant. Really indignant. She had planned for so long and almost destroyed Stormwind from the inside, but Duque's return ruined her plan? Even if she was facing the strongest forces of the Alliance and the Horde. Xianxia gritted her teeth in pain and suddenly flapped her wings, allowing the unique magic of the dragon race to be infused into her back and wings. Her huge figure suddenly rushed into the sky. Oh no. The cage can't stop her. Brawl Bearskin exclaimed subconsciously. However, in the next moment he was shocked to find that the powerful figures around him did not react. Even the frivolous Gavin Rad was in the mood to whistle, as if he was waiting to watch a show. Watch a show? Watch what show? The Black Dragon Princess is about to escape. On the other side, after the Black Dragon Princess crashed into the hemispherical magic formation of Lover's Island, she roared, "Repent! Mortals, I will burn you to ashes in the sky." She thought that she would see the mortal heroes panicking. After all, what followed next was her ultimate move. But the powerful figures of the mortals still did not react. They scattered on the ground in twos and threes, looking up at her emotionlessly. Stupid people. They don't know how terrifying I am. Xianxia was furious. Then she puffed up her chest and took a deep breath. Oh no. Isn't this the deep breath that Duque mentioned? Valilla was a little shocked. Master Marcus also said that the first deep breath doesn't have to be dodged. Vanessa waved the pair of high-tier epic-grade daggers that Valilla was extremely envious of. But, just as Brawl, Valilla and William were panicking, Duque shouted in his heart, "Debt collector beats people." Duque immediately received a response. Everyone knew why there was no need to dodge the first time. An angry but majestic female voice suddenly came from the sky. "You bastard, didn't I say that I'm busy?" Onyxia's dragon face suddenly turned deathly pale. It was not just her. Everyone could tell who the female voice was. It was the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. Duque spread his hands. "But Onyxia can fly. We can't do anything about it." Give me half a ton of Häagen-Dazs. Later. 50 kilograms. Forget it if you don't want it. Duque shamelessly bargained with the Red Dragon Queen in front of the Black Dragon Princess. In the next second, without even bargaining, a translucent red claw the size of half a football field suddenly appeared in the sky above Onyxia's back. Deep breath. *CK. The poor Black Dragon Princess was slapped back to the ground by the claw. Chapter 11:21. This was cheating and breaking the rules. Why would the dragon aspect take action personally? This was like an adult beating up a baby. Didn't they say that the ultimate experts wouldn't make a move? Even if it was just one hit. But it was enough to be fatal. And yet, a meal of ice cream, Onyxia was overwhelmed with grief. She was as sad and indignant as she could be. She had eaten ice cream before and it was indeed good stuff. She heard that it was also invented by that damn Duque. But she, the Black Dragon Queen, had betrayed her with just 100 pounds of ice cream. She couldn't accept this result. She was already in a bad situation. Facing an opponent who was a higher level than her, she had no way of fighting back. Onyxia hadn't even flown more than 150 feet before she was slapped back to the ground by the Red Dragon Queen. Onyxia was miserable. Like a cannonball, she crashed back into the crystal island. The uneven crystals on the ground stabbed her again. What was even worse was that the dragon breath she had gathered with all her might had exploded in her lungs. Even though a dragon's lungs could store fire, it was still very damaging. Flames that could be sprayed out through the neck, mouth and nose were few. Most of the high-temperature flames rushed into the bronchi and crashed into the alveoli. Needless to say, internal injury. This was definitely a very serious internal injury. At first, Onyxia thought that her head was dizzy from the sudden impact with the ground, but she soon realized that it was worse than that. She couldn't breathe. She didn't have enough anatomical knowledge. If she did, she would know that the flames that couldn't reach the alveoli had burned a lot of her alveolar tissues. This directly affected the air that passed through the alveoli and injected oxygen into the blood vessels. On the ground, Duque was a little stunned. He had expected that deep breath would be interrupted, but he didn't think it would be so powerful. Alexstrasza's slap at the critical moment had taken a third of Onyxia's HP. Now according to the game they had entered the third stage. Originally there would be a very disgusting group fear in the third stage. This time it definitely wouldn't happen. The ability to spew lava from the ground was a skill that only appeared in Onyxia's lair in the Dustwallow Swamp. In order to avoid being caught in a chaotic situation, Duke specifically decided to fight in the shallow waters of the Mirror Lake. He didn't want to have to deal with it. At this moment, it seemed that the battle had caused considerable damage. However, this was originally a lake and the damage to the bottom of the lake was only about a meter deep. It could be said that Duque had used his strategy to minimize the damage. Duque's face turned cold. Teams 3 to 6 attack with all your might. Teams 1 and 2 be on high alert. Xianxia struggled with all her might, but all her movements seemed more like a deathbed struggle. The mortal experts around her, except for a few who could withstand her attacks, were like butterflies fluttering through flowers, nimbly avoiding all of her movements. He continued to widen the wounds on her body, continuing to cause the bleeding effect. It had been 21 years since the dark portal opened. Many combat skills that were supposed to be developed in the future had already been developed in advance due to a certain transmigrator's reminder. For example, the usage cycle of Fury. Now, as long as the warrior profession stood firmly on the ground, they could greatly increase their muscle strength through Fury. Coupled with equipment that could strengthen the Fury circuit, that was similar to a magic circuit, ordinary warriors could often unleash a destructive power that was measured in tons. This was also why after reaching a high level in the realm of heroes, heroes could rely on their own strength to fight a giant dragon. Of course, like old Bull Kane, Taurens were born with high strength. With a high starting point, they became even more insane after the bonuses. Everyone could see that Xianxia was at the end of her tether. The Alliance and Horde experts were like a noose, tightening around the Black Dragon Princess' neck. Soon she would be unable to breathe and lying on the ground. It was at times like this that the heroes were even more focused. Which expert didn't have a few trump cards? Standing beside Duque, Mograine, Jaina, Tyrant, and Grom all gripped their weapons nervously. Suddenly Duque turned around. West. A frostfire arrow, the size of a carriage, shot towards the void in the west. There was clearly nothing there a second ago. However, Duque's attack created ripples that looked like water. This mysterious spatial undulation spread perpendicular to the ground. Without any hesitation, Krasis, the commander of the Dalajan wizards who had been waiting at the side, gave the order to attack. With Morning Star wizards as the main force, 2 teams of 300 elite wizards immediately followed Duque's instructions and activated war magic. This was a large-scale magic formation with the purpose of war. With the support of a large number of magic gems in the magic formation, the mana of an individual would be increased to a rather terrifying level. It was equivalent to the attack of 50 Radiant Moon wizards. The torrential rain of arcane missiles suddenly poured into the void. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Accompanied by a strange sound, something revealed its true appearance from the void. At first glance, it seemed to be a red mountain peak, as if the Reedridge mountain that was thousands of miles away had suddenly arrived at the edge of Stormwind City. Upon closer inspection, it was not a mountain, but an incomparably huge eyeball that was supported by pink biological tissue. Strange. Mysterious. It was overflowing with an evil aura. The purple eyeball with the disgusting yellow color of feces was clearly just an illusion. But when its surging evil will spread out, everyone smelled a nauseating stench. Their stomachs felt like they were being turned upside down, and they wanted to vomit out the dinner they had last night along with their own organs in one go. In the next second, octopus-like tentacles that were at least 1 or 2 stories tall suddenly appeared in the middle of each team, violently lashing out at each of the mortal heroes. The tight formation was immediately thrown into disarray. Damn it! What is this? Gavin Rad cursed. Duque, who was being stared at by the huge eyeball, finally muttered a forbidden name. Ancient God. Thun. Although he knew that Xianxia had some sort of backup plan, no matter how wild Duque's imagination was, he would never have thought that an ancient god would personally take action. Without giving them time to react, a huge cluster of red light suddenly shot out from the swelling and changing color of the eyeball. F***CK. This time it was Duque's turn to curse. This was the kinetic ray of death that players least wanted to see. In the game, this was definitely something that would kill anyone who touched it. Duque did not dare to imagine what would happen to the crowd if they were hit by such a powerful ray cannon. Chapter 1122. Ajax. Duque shouted. The magic circuit in his body spun 100 times faster than usual. The accumulated magic in his body, the magic drawn from the elemental plane, gathered in the void. This was a so-called magic that a transmigrator had secretly learned from another world. At the Breaking Dawn level, many magic only differed in the way energy was molded. Everyone could see that just as the red ray of light shot from the gigantic eyeball was about to hit the area around Onyxia, a gorgeous hexagonal ice crystal shield appeared diagonally in front of the crowd, blocking the red ray of light. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. A total of 7 layers of magic light shields blocked the attack at a 45-degree angle. There was no pause at all. The first 5 layers of the light shield, which was condensed with highly concentrated magic, were easily shattered in less than 1/100th of a second. The 6th layer lasted for a full 1/3 of a second before it cried out and fell. This gave the heroes precious time to react. The knights were invincible, the mages used ice, and the thieves raised the shadow cloak that could resist magic attacks. The other professions could only pray for the best. The most crucial 7th layer had a special texture that was different from the previous layers. It was very bright and it felt like a mirror. This layer of magic shield had done its job. In the end, most of the attacks from the mysterious giant monster were reflected. From the path it came from to the angle, there was a very obvious angle. The red light that was refracted beautifully dispersed into countless light beams that were as thick as a human's leg, splashing into the lush elven forest. Rumble. Countless trees were instantly turned into charcoal. Even the West Springs stronghold, which was 3 kilometers away, was hit. The top of the 50-meter-tall white stronghold was directly cut off by a third by the largest red light beam. One must know that the West Springs stronghold had been reinforced and had an extraordinary magic protection circle for 24 hours. Even so, it was still unable to resist. The light of the magic protection circle merely flashed, and the top of the tower was directly blown off. Everyone suddenly realized that if it wasn't for Duque, perhaps they would have all died in that attack. But this was not the end. Most of the red rays were refracted, but a small portion of the scattered scorching rays hit the heroes surrounding Onyxia. Boulang's back was burned and he lay flat on the ground. The weapon in Edwin Van Cleef's right hand melted away, and his fingers seemed to have been injured. He temporarily lost his ability to fight. Gina Goldsword's right thigh was pierced, and a bloody hole the size of a baby's fist appeared. She screamed and fell to the ground. Brawl Bearskin was grazed in the stomach and Vale Era dragged him behind as he fell. Turayan activated his invincibility and blocked the attack with his divine sword. He was fine, but the bright holy light on his body dimmed by at least half. What Duque was most worried about finally happened. Onyxia seized the rare opportunity and rushed out in one breath. "Don't let her get away," Duque shouted as he flashed forward. Naturally, there were also the 2 teams of experts who had not made a move from the beginning to the end. Mograine directly slashed and holy light gathered on Ashbringer. In an instant, a huge crescent arc with a diameter of 10 meters appeared, and it directly cut the Black Dragon Princess' left hind leg. Master Roar's famous leap slash was here again. According to the rumors, Master Roar had reached a terrifying level where every time he jumped, an Abyss Lord would definitely kneel. Of course, this rumor was not far from the truth. Bloodhowl drew a beautiful arc of light in the air and dragon blood splattered everywhere as the axe fell. The Black Dragon Princess almost lost a claw, and her entire left claw was cut in half. She screamed in pain and her whole body flew out without a care. A figure leaped high and like a meteor he attacked the Black Dragon Princess who was trying to get up. Yes. He was one of the clones of the Stormwind King Varian Rin who had lost his memory, the violent and powerful Lagash. In his hands the 2 swords formed a cross, and he ruthlessly slashed at Onyxia's neck. That is. Alicia was a little stunned. "I gave it to him." It was Dana who spoke. The weapons in Varian's hands were once wielded by a pair of night elf brothers, Valilian and Lavelian. These 2 magical elven swords were called Shalater and Aramine, which meant Shadow Ripper and Shadow Plunderer in Darnassus. In the Battle of Mount Hydrel, these 2 brothers died in battle, and the 2 swords were once taken by a demon. After that, Jaina killed that powerful demon. With Tyron's nod, the 2 swords became Jaina's spoils of war. When Varian rushed to Theramore, Jaina gave the 2 swords to Varian as a gift to his childhood friend. Now the 2 swords shone brilliantly in Varian's hands. The incomparably accurate slash directly cut a huge cross on Onyxia's back and neck. That was a slash that even broke a small part of the bone. If she wasn't a real demigod dragon, she would have been decapitated by now. Roar. Another scream. Onyxia couldn't hold it in anymore. She finally couldn't help but use her last life-saving move. Wah! A shrill sound wave suddenly spread for a few kilometers around Mirror Lake. This wasn't an ordinary sound wave attack. This was a sound wave attack that contained the power of another ancient god, Enzos. This was almost a replica of Enzatha's attempt to save Nesario back then. Although it was much weaker, the target was no longer the 4 dragon kings, but mortals. The shrill sound passed through all defenses, ignored armor, holy light and elemental power, and directly entered the minds of the heroes. Pft, pft, pft. The heads of the mortals who were slightly closer, whether they were mages or ordinary knights, exploded like watermelons. This kind of soul explosion directly hit their minds. Even people with strong wills like Theon and Sidon couldn't help but cover their heads and kneel on the ground in pain. Even Duque, who had the strongest mental defense, was shocked to find that 6 out of the 7 mental defense barriers he had set up in advance had been broken, and the last barrier was also on the verge of collapse, shaking like waves. Onyxia finally flew, not just by relying on her tattered wings, but also the dragon language magic that had the ability to float. Before she flew up, she turned back and gave Duque a fierce look. She hated him. She deeply imprinted this human man who had almost tricked her to death in the depths of her soul. That's right, she really wanted to turn around and bite Duque to death. But she didn't dare. Chapter 11:23. She realized that Duque was not affected as much as she thought. Looking at his reaction, he would probably return to normal in a few seconds. Perhaps she could bite Duque to death, but that would ruin her last chance to escape. Without hesitation, Onyxia flew across the treetops and flew towards the southeast. She did not dare to go north because she could clearly feel the life of her servants fading away in the north of Stormwind City. Even if there were not many powerful mortals there, it would be unwise to pass through a heavily guarded city in such a state. It was the same for the West Spring Fortress in the southwest. She did not dare to bet on whether Duque had arranged a large number of troops there. She could only go south. She flapped her wings with all her might and rushed out. Unfortunately, other than those powerful mortals, there were still a large number of griffins in the sky. From the beginning, the griffins did not approach her. When Kudrin realized that Onyxia was still trying to escape, more than 500 griffins began to surround her from all directions. And Zoth, help me, Onyxia screamed in the draconic language. The mysterious ancient god replied faintly, "This is the last time, little one. If you still do not have the ability to escape, I will give up on my investment in you." In the next second, the griffins that filled the sky suddenly lost control. As if they saw the most terrifying thing, they ignored the calls of their masters, the dwarven knights, and flapped their wings and fled in all directions. No. Come back, Scarlet. Come back. Kudrin painfully realized that even his griffin king had lost control. Taking advantage of this last chance, Onyxia finally rushed out of the encirclement. The holy knights with the shortest legs were the first to fall behind, followed by the warriors, and then the rogues who had used up their sprint. When even the rangers who were relatively fast found out that Onyxia's huge body was beyond the range of their arrows, only Pharaoh could catch up to the Black Dragon Princess. "Chase!" Duque shouted. Other than the injured Gina Goldsword, all the Radiant Moon mages and above chased after her at high speed. The dragon was fast, but the mages who used flash to travel were not any slower than the Black Dragon Princess. In the gap between each blink, they could instantly launch a large number of spells at the princess, causing her even more serious injuries. However, when he saw Onyxia's HP remaining at 5%, Duque's heart bled. Oh my god. Now he was letting this bastard go. Stormwind will not have peace. However, if she kept running away, they wouldn't be able to properly deal damage to her. The thing that he was most worried about had happened. The mages behind Duque began to fall behind helplessly. Normally, a mage's flash could not be used limitlessly. Only Radiant Moon mages and above could slightly eliminate the effects of a chaotic magic circuit. Flash was also a standard teleportation. It had to have a clear destination to teleport to, then use arcane energy to connect to the destination, temporarily turn its body into elements, and then quickly teleport to the destination. Not only did it require a mage's mana control, but it also required a mage's spatial positioning ability. If they made a mistake, they could teleport their body into a tree or rock, and even the strongest mage would die. Not every pharaoh could have a system elf like Duque to use spatial positioning. It was better in the open plains, but once they entered the elven forest, mages like Solarian were the first to fall behind. Then Jaina. When they reached the twilight forest, even Ronan was left behind. Only Duque chased after the Black Dragon Princess, relentlessly repeating the process of flash, instant magic bombardment, and flash again. Duque, give up. You can't catch me. Onyxia shouted in midair. Duque felt like he was in a trance. He didn't think that a dragon's vitality would be so abnormal. Perhaps she used some secret technique, but according to the system elf's judgment, the Black Dragon Princess HP was slowly recovering. And she had intentionally recovered her wings first. Although she couldn't fly high, she was still in the Air Force. Duque couldn't fly, so he was at a disadvantage. Haha. You can't catch me. I'll escape, and then I'll keep raiding your territory. I'll burn your beloved subjects, your beloved women, to ashes. Duque didn't say a word and shot a dozen frostfire arrows. Unfortunately, he only hit twice, and the princess cried out in pain. Just like that, Onyxia continued to flee in the sky, cursing as she ran, while Duque continued to chase after her until he reached a certain place. Suddenly, Duque stopped and stopped using flash. The furious Black Dragon Princess was no longer in a hurry to escape. Although she was covered in wounds and couldn't hold on much longer, the ecstasy of escaping made her so excited that she couldn't control herself. Haha. Can't play anymore? Can't fight anymore? Or are you finally going to give up? Duke Marcus, I told you you can't catch me. Just you wait, I'll soon recover from my injuries, and then I'll launch the most horrifying and tragic revenge on you and your damn country. Duque was silent for a full 3 seconds before he suddenly raised his head 45 degrees. He had a mocking smile on his lips. Ha! Ha! The shrill laughter pierced her heart like a sharp arrow, causing her heart to hurt even more. A dragon's heart was huge and powerful. Duque's sneak attack directly pierced through one of her ventricles. If she wasn't a dragon that had stepped into the demigod realm, she would have died a long time ago. She hated it. So, Duque's laughter deeply provoked her. What are you laughing at? Nothing. I'm laughing at your ignorance and stupidity. What dash? The princess roared angrily. I've always dreamed of luring you here. Although I always thought that I wouldn't have the chance, who knew that you would come here yourself? Onyxia suddenly had a bad premonition. She suddenly turned her head. Although there was a mountain separating her from the place where the energy was converging, she could still clearly feel that there was a ridiculously huge amount of magic power gathering not far away from her. Little female dragon, when you go to hell, if anyone asks how you died, don't forget to tell them, you died of stupidity. This is already the territory of Karazhan. The blood drained from Onyxia's dragon face. Careless. She was really careless. She didn't dare to run to Stormwind City in the north, and she also avoided the West Springs stronghold in the southwest. In the end, in her panic, she was unintentionally chased by Duque from the northwest, so she subconsciously ran southeast. In the end, she ran headfirst into the range of the scariest wizard tower in the world, and it was even Duque's wizard tower. There was a path to heaven, but you didn't take it. Instead, you barged into hell. Die, Onyxia. Chapter 11:24. The dark night was suddenly split open by a strong flash of light. A bolt of lightning as thick as a river descended from the sky and gathered at the top of the wizard tower that reached into the clouds. Then it shot out again, traversing 1,600 meters of empty space, exploding the peak of a small mountain, and finally blasted Onyxia, who was hovering in midair without any deviation. Ah! The Black Dragon Princess scream was so King melodious. It was clearly a scream, but Duque's bones softened when he heard it. There was no reason. It was for the indescribable thrill of a first kill. This was not a boss in the game that could only hide in dungeons for players to attack or be attacked. This was a powerful existence in the realm of demigods. Although Onyxia could only be considered the weakest in the realm of demigods, she was too famous. Back in the days, many high-difficulty dungeons relied on the time-limited bonus brought by the Black Dragon Princess's head. And how many players farmed her for countless days and nights for the sake of that, Onyxia's reigns. to ride on a smaller version of the Black Dragon Princess as a mount. Sigh. Tears welled up just thinking about it. There was no other way now. Letting the dragon return to the mountains was a million times scarier than letting the tiger return to the mountains. He could only kill her. Duque stared at the sky, watching the Black Dragon Princess's huge body fall from the sky and land on the ground. This was already near the Mistmantle Manor near the Twilight Forest's night town. When the Black Dragon Princess fell diagonally, she crashed into an abandoned wooden house. The walls and pillars of the wooden house were completely torn apart after a sharp crash. The bricks and wooden boards, dust and pillars all broke and then exploded, turning into dust and debris that splattered outwards. In an instant, half of the manor had become ruins and smoke and dust filled the air. Duque rushed over at high speed and something unexpected happened. When he approached with his magic shield and ice barrier activated, he suddenly heard what should have been a long-lost murmur. This sound passed through his eardrums and echoed directly in Duque's spirit sea. Do you have a girlfriend? When are you getting married? When are you going to have kids? Wait. This is the murmur of the ancient gods? Didn't that bastard Enzos claim to have given up on saving Onyxia? Before Duque could react, the whisper suddenly changed. Hehe. It really is you. Although I don't know how you transmigrated 10,000 years ago, do you think that the little trick you played with me 10,000 years ago will still be effective 10,000 years later? This was clearly Enzo's voice. The declaration made by this voice gave Duque a very bad feeling. Not good. Not good. Not good. That's right. The imaginary mental barrier I created with the system 10,000 years ago resisted Nzotha's whispers. How could someone like Enzos not do anything for 10,000 years? Nothing improved. As if confirming Duque's ominous premonition in the next moment, Duque's spiritual sea was suddenly injured. In the illusory spiritual world, an enormous pillar that seemed to be able to pierce through the heavens and the earth crashed into it. Then he ignored all the order and rules that Duque had constructed in his spiritual world and directly messed up everything. It was more violent than an earthquake, more shocking than a tsunami, more despairing than the collapse of the sky. Not only Duque's spiritual world, even the system elf crashed in that instant. In the real world, Duque felt as if he was struck by lightning. His whole body was rooted to the ground. Not to mention using magic, he couldn't even move his pinky. At this moment, a violent whirlwind suddenly swept up in the dust. A giant black beast used its remaining claw and leg to struggle and pounced over. It opened its terrifying scarlet mouth full of crisscrossed fangs at Duque. The world suddenly became silent. Everything was light and fluttering. Duque, who came back to his senses, saw the world in front of him turn black and white and finally came to a realization. Faster, see. I'm dead. I'm actually dead. This doesn't make sense. This is impossible. If there's no reason for this, it would be strange. Duque realized that he had died for a long time. It had been so long that he almost forgot that he could still die. The horrifying pain of his body being torn apart still lingered on his soul. Duque suddenly shivered. It couldn't be helped. Being torn apart by an enraged black dragon was definitely not a pleasant experience. This made Duque think of his first death in the Elven Forest 20 years ago. Damn, wasn't the one who killed him a wild boar named Prince? Now that he had transmigrated 20 years ago, he was given a princess. This was really... The sudden sound of the system notification sounded. Duque was really surprised and happy. He was happy that the system had recovered. He was surprised that the system notification said, Warning. Warning. Host, your body is being destroyed at a high speed. The will of the evil god Enzoth is eroding your body and the remnant soul on it. Your soul energy and human nature are decreasing at a rate of 3% per second. Do you want to resurrect? Nonsense. Of course resurrect. Duque couldn't make it to the corpse in time. In the time it took to run to the corpse, he lost even more moral integrity. A moment ago in the abandoned manor, the Black Dragon Princess was laughing maniacally as she tore Duque's corpse. Blood, intestines, pieces of minced meat, and Duque's head that had died with a grievance. Ah, you're dead. Dead. Let you plot against me? Let you ambush me? Let you destroy the plan that I spent so much time on? Let you gather so many strong people to injure me all over? Ah. What is retribution? This is retribution. Justice will eventually be defeated by evil. Just as Onyxia was venting her anger to her heart's content, a sudden change occurred. All of Duque's body parts, broken limbs and even blood disappeared in an instant. They turned into streams of light and gathered behind her. Onyxia felt as if a giant had grabbed her long dragon neck. Her maniacal laughter stopped abruptly. She twisted her neck that was like a rusty machine and slowly turned her head. An energy giant that was as tall as a 5-story building was standing behind her. She could tell at a glance that the core of the energy giant was Duke Marcus, who should have been killed and dismembered by her just now. But the state of the energy giant caused her heart to fall into the darkest hell of ice. That was definitely not a normal elemental giant. Because no elemental giant in the world would be like this guy in front of her. The left half was the brightest holy light and the right half was the darkest darkness. Light and darkness were separated by the middle of the body. They were not connected, but there was no conflict. Onyxia was stunned. But Duque's current state was also a mess. Warning. Warning. Due to the soul being partially contaminated, the 7 major sins have been triggered. Pride, gluttony, lust, wrath, envy. That was the system's warning. Calm down, think about it. What are the 3 major virtues? That was Alonso's fail's soul whispering. Chapter 11:25. At this moment the chaos in Stormwind City had subsided. Most of the conservative nobles had been arrested. What was even more unexpected was that Elune had descended upon them. Tyron stood at the top of Stormwind Fortress and summoned Elune's power. The goddess' gigantic shadow floated in the Valentine's Day sky, healing the injured citizens with her gentle moonlight. No, even many people who were thought to be dead were forcibly pulled back from the edge of hell by the goddess's unparalleled divine arts. In an instant, the name of Elune rose to fame in this country that was previously dominated by the Church of Holy Light. They did not receive news from Duque, but Ronan, who had returned dejectedly, came instead. "Where's Duque?" Jaina and the rest hurriedly surrounded him. "I don't know. I couldn't catch up to them when we neared the Twilight Forest." Actually, it was not Ronan's fault. Other than the most developed areas along the railway, most of the forest was still uninhabited. For example, the abandoned manor in Mistermental might seem close to the night town on the map. In reality, it was 30 kilometers away in a straight line. In a place as dark as the Twilight Forest, the night watchman of the night town would need at least 5 to 6 hours to rush over. In the manor, only Onyxia and Duque were left. No, it should be said that there was also a terrible will of the ancient god. "Impossible. You're already dead," Nsathas will said with certainty. At the same time, it launched another attack on Duque's mind. "Huh? Is that so?" Duque smiled, but it was a very strange smile. On the left side of his face that was shrouded in darkness, there was a sinister smile on the left corner of his mouth. On the right side that was filled with light, the smile made one feel as if they were bathed in a spring breeze. One smile, 2 different interpretations. Even Onyxia, a dragon who had lived for so long, felt a chill in her heart when she saw this kind of oddity. Enzos launched his attack. He didn't expect that he would be able to smash into Duke's spiritual sea like a battering ram the last time in a domineering manner. This time it wouldn't work. The huge spiritual attack was like a muddy pond and did not cause any ripples. "Stupid dragon. Run. I was relying on you to launch an attack on his soul. As long as you don't die, I can find a chance to deal with this brat." After Mystic instructed the Black Dragon Princess, Enzos shouted, "You must have a weakness." At this moment, Duque's mind was in chaos. However, the words humanity reduced by 40% on his retina deeply stimulated Duque's nerves. He was very angry and wanted to vent the depression in his heart. Unknowingly, he had already made a counterattack. "Huh. So you like to use whispers to hypnotize people into psychosis? Great. Come on, hurt each other. Let's see who becomes mentally ill first." Faced with Enzos' mental message, Duque immediately replied back. What is this?" Enzos exclaimed. "In theory, these things should be memories and soul fragments." When they were transmitted back to Enzos through the mental channel, Enzos was dumbfounded. In this world there was definitely no one who had seen what a cartoon was, and no one who had seen what a happy goat and big wolf was, or what a tragic villain was, or what a weakling was. Enzos suddenly realized that while he was trying to disturb Duque, he was also being disturbed. He suddenly turned into a big gray wolf, and every time he wanted to catch sheep to eat, there would be a tragedy. No. This is not me. He turned into a monster and was killed by the galactic fleet. No. This is not me either. However, when a memory hidden in the deepest part of his heart was dug out, Enzos finally realized that the other party was also using inhuman methods to crazily collect all of his memories, and then quickly condense an illusion that was more realistic and more in line with his memories. Enzos saw his past. It was the ancient era when the Titans descended. They used unparalleled power to destroy everything of their ancient gods. Their people, their territory, their bodies, and then cruelly suppressed them. Enzos tried to resist but was suppressed again and again. The pain of the past kept resurfacing. What kind of power is this? Not only that, the list of evil god believers buried in the shallow layer of his consciousness was ruthlessly dug out. One by one the names leaked out. No. This can't be a human's method? Enzos was really shocked this time. He was scared. He was really scared. He cut off all connections with Onyxia as if he was avoiding the plague, and even destroyed all the secret methods he had hidden in the Black Dragon Princess soul. This was because he was afraid that Duque would follow his soul imprint and track his true location. A few seconds later, when Enzos' power retreated from Onyxia's body like a tide, the Black Dragon Princess was in trouble. She was already on the verge of death from her injuries, and the last attack to kill Duque had used up almost all of her strength. Now that she saw that Duque had actually defeated Enzos in the domain of consciousness, she was scared out of her wits. Her huge body staggered and she could barely move. Her survival instinct was still urging her to escape from this man who was unknown whether he was a god or a demon. At this moment, Duque's consciousness was a little unclear, and he almost instinctively chased after Onyxia. This was because the system clearly indicated that Onyxia still had 40% of his soul in her body. Host. It is strongly not recommended to kill the Black Dragon Princess. The part of your soul that was separated due to your death is already quite unstable. Once Onyxia, who is the carrier, dies, there is a high chance that the part of your soul will dissipate along with her soul. What the heck? I can't kill her. What else can I do? I strongly recommend activating taming mode. Activate it. Do it the fastest way. I'll leave it to you. Duque didn't feel good, and a large amount of negative emotions interfered with his brain. Once the 7 sins were activated, they wouldn't stop until they were vented. Even with Alun's blessing, he couldn't withstand it. Duque tried his best to maintain his consciousness, but he couldn't do it. His body seemed to be doing something that had nothing to do with him. No. Don't come over. Onyxia screamed, but she didn't manage to take 2 steps before the giant of light and darkness pounced on her, pressing her head with one hand and choking her neck with the other. Its huge mouth bit on the wound that Varian had slashed on her neck, and it sucked her blood crazily. The premonition of death suddenly came crashing down on her head. She no longer had the strength to break free. At this moment she made a decision that she didn't know if it was smart or stupid. She actually used the last of her strength to transform into a human form. But this time she was pressed down again as she staggered to escape. But this time it wasn't the energy giant but Duque himself. Chapter 11:26. Before death, many things would flash through his mind like a flashing lantern. Onyxia really regretted it. After her father, Nesario, knelt down, she even specially improved the dragon race's ultimate transformation spell. At the risk of being discovered, she could give herself a stronger defense in her human form. So what? She was still discovered, and her chest was still pierced by a sword. Transforming into a dragon was still tolerable, but transforming back into a human form made her entire body hurt. However, she no longer had any stamina or magic power, so she could only maintain the lowest physiological consumption in her human form. She only had one last trump card left. She struggled and tried to get rid of Duque's big hand while screaming, "What's left in my body is your soul, right? Let me go or I'll destroy this part of your soul." What a coincidence. If it's a trump card, I have one too. A sinister smile appeared on one side of Duque's face. The next moment, a deeper sense of weakness spread throughout Onyxia's body. This is the soul of a demon. To be precise, this is 1/5 of the dragon's soul, and it's only for the black dragons. Stupid female dragon, did you only realize now that your power has weakened? As Duque laughed, he tied a necklace made of what could be called the Black Dragon's soul around the neck of the Black Dragon Princess. Ah! Onyxia let out a scream. That was not a physical pain, but a punishment from the soul that originated from a more fundamental source. She lost the last bit of strength to resist and gasped for breath. Am I going to die? She found that her will had begun to fade. Die. Duque laughed. If it were at the beginning, I might have let you die. Since you've let me die for a long time, this isn't how I'll settle this score. Duque gently caressed the Black Dragon Princess' body with one hand that emitted holy light. Although she was a tenacious black dragon, she only had 1% of her HP left. If she did not receive treatment, she would still die from excessive bleeding. Under the influence of the holy light that was extremely dense, Onyxia could not help but let out a comfortable murmur. She was pleasantly surprised to find that her wounds were healing. Although most of them were superficial wounds, at least she wouldn't die for a while. Duque was afraid of losing his soul. This was an opportunity. Before she was ready to implement the wonderful idea that she thought she had, the nightmare came again. That was an even more terrifying soul torture. After an unknown amount of time, she finally calmed down. Lying on the dirty black soil, she panted heavily. The sweat on her back was so much that it even diluted the bloodstains on her body. At this moment, Onyxia, who had turned her head, saw that Duque's hands were equally strange. One held light and the other held darkness. The two opposing forces were calm and tamed in Duque's hands. The black palm pressed down again, and suddenly, an overwhelming pain surged from every corner of her body. It was so painful that she could not breathe, and her brain almost melted from the pain. In the next second, the golden palm caressed her back, and the pain from the invasion of the dark power instantly subsided. It even healed the wounds on her skin. Duke's voice rang out again. He spoke very slowly, even with a gentle and refined tone, but in her ears, it was no different from the death knell of hell. Onyxia, you attempted to overthrow the alliance, plotted against the Stormwind King Varian, and caused so many civilian casualties. Your sins cannot be washed away even with death. Now I'll give you a chance. *T. I am the noble Black Dragon Queen Onyxia. You can hang my head on the city gates to show off your power. But don't expect me to yield. Give up, I will not yield even if I die 10,000 times. Onyxia scolded. Well said. Then you can die 10,000 times first. Duque's black palm pressed Onyxia's beautiful head into the mud. In the next moment, a dark impact similar to Mind Blast directly hit her spiritual world. She suddenly saw many unimaginable scenes. It was the reflection of her fighting in her lair in Dustwallow Swamp. Who was he? Who were they? Facing 40 strong mortals who were like wolves and tigers, she desperately resisted. She slapped with her claws, bit with her mouth, swept with her tail, and burned with her strongest dragon breath. But she lost. Again and again. She was defeated countless times, and her most precious treasure was stolen. Then she was skinned, and even her head was hung on the gates of Stormwind City. Oh no. All of this was fake. Fake. The first few times she could still hypnotize herself. But that feeling was too real. Touch, taste, smell, all 5 senses. Then day after day, year after year of failure. The frustration and humiliation brought by endless failure accumulated in her heart again and again. Onyxia, who had once thought herself strong, began to lose confidence. She didn't know that this was someone's system genie. It started to render the video of countless players pushing down the Black Dragon Girl, reconstructing it into the most perfect 3D. Almost everyone was made of more than 100,000 facets, looking absolutely no different from the real thing. It even recorded her various movements in her dragon form and made a series of counterattacks and solo kills, giving her a deeper sense of defeat. 10,000 defeats caused the combat strength that she was most proud of to feel worthless. 10,000 mental attacks, but only 3 seconds passed in reality. When the mental attack was over, Onyxia's eyes were blank. Do I still have a future? Yes, of course. Your future is to put on the reins and become the exclusive mount of Sir Duque. Behind her, Duque laughed sinisterly. I have a deep, deep grudge against you. Don't worry, I will definitely make up for the dreams that I didn't realize before. Not only will I ride you to Stormwind City for a ride, but I will also take you to Dragon Slumber Temple for a stroll. For some reason, Onyxia felt that this wasn't the real Duque. Some kind of dark power was affecting Duque, but she just had to bump into the muzzle of the gun. Hearing Duque declare that he wanted her to be his mount and let him ride her around the world in shame, not only showing off in front of mortals, but also becoming a laughing stock in front of her own dragon race. Onyxia wanted to die. No, I will never give in. She used the last of her stubbornness and stared fiercely at Duque. That's a good look. Come on. Change into a dragon and run for me. What, you don't want to? Fine, I can run in human form too. After saying that, Duque actually started to search. What can be used as a rein? I got it. It was a rubber ball with several holes in it and 2 ribbons tied to both sides of the ball. Chapter 1127. Duque had a wonderful dream. He raced. He became the male lead in an action movie. However, this time he felt very good. He could clearly feel that he was holding the steering wheel with both hands. As long as he pressed the black horn in the middle of the steering wheel, the car would make a strange whimpering sound. It was very unique. Although it felt like he was driving a Ferrari, it was also a little like riding a motorcycle. Yes, it should be riding a motorcycle. The thrill brought by high-speed racing was unparalleled. As fast as lightning. It felt like he was practicing swordsmanship. Every jolt made him feel like he was about to be thrown off the motorcycle. Why does it feel like riding a horse? So bumpy. In his hazy vision, Duke seemed to see himself whipping a horse, a thick 9-tailed horsewhip, lashing at the horse's butt. All of a sudden a strange sound was heard. Congratulations, master. Onyxia has surrendered. She is beginning to return to the master's soul. Your moral integrity is being topped up at 55%, 56%. As the value rose to 100%, Duque finally began to wake up. When he truly realized what was happening, he realized that something was wrong. Damn. What the hell is this? Why am I holding 2 dragon horns with both hands? Why are these 2 dragon horns on the head of Countess Katrana, who has transformed into a human? And then my dragon taming whip. Perhaps he lost control due to his excitement. After Duque woke up, he unintentionally gave Onyxia the final blow. Onyxia, whose mouth was stuffed with something, arched her back. She raised her head to the sky and let out a sorrowful cry. Then, as if she had lost all her strength, she lay on the ground in an oars position. Duque was terrified. He loosened his grip and the dragon horns slipped from his hand. At this time, Duque finally realized what he had done. Damn. I tamed a dragon? Sensitive to the changes in the dragon taming whip, Onyxia's eyes were filled with tears. She revealed a begging look that made Duque feel incredulous. Duque pulled her up and hurriedly removed the restraining tool from her mouth. Onyxia opened her mouth and said, Master, I give up. Don't torture me anymore. I'll be obedient in the future. Things seem to have become a little complicated. Duque was dumbfounded. Logically speaking, since Onyxia had done so many bad things, she should have been killed 10,000 times. 10,000 times was not wrong. But now their relationship seemed to be subtly different. More importantly, the Black Dragon Princess's humiliating declaration caused her soul to change. In the spirit world's vision, Duque could clearly see that there was a rein in his right hand. This wasn't an ordinary rein. It was a soul rein made from Onyxia's soul. This was similar to how Sargeras made the demon lords hand over part of their souls and store them in the twisted nether. He wasn't boasting. Right now, as long as Duque willed it, he could make Onyxia suffer a fate worse than death. System notification. Congratulations, host, you have obtained the legendary item. True Onyxia's reins. That's right. Not those miniaturized copies of Onyxia that were only for players to fool around with. This was the real Black Dragon Princess's reins. Duque couldn't help but laugh out loud. Ha! Ha! I'll let you farm it 100 times and it won't drop. Who asked you to be reserved? Who asked you to call me black? Now I don't want those knockoffs, I have the real thing. That was resentment. Just like the undead horse that couldn't drop Rivendell countless times. Before Duque transmigrated, he couldn't get the Black Dragon Princess's reins no matter what. Once he did, a gay bastard called Recruit, and he teamed up to steal his dragon. This resentment of the Black Hand even triggered the envy of the 7 deadly sins. Now that Duque's thoughts were clear, he felt refreshed. But Onyxia was in a tragedy. Onyxia shed tears of humiliation when she thought of the miserable life she would have to lead in the future. If it was an ordinary threat, she would definitely rather die than comply. However, it turned out that there was an existence even more terrifying than ghosts and gods. Duque. On one side was extreme pain and torture, and on the other side was the most gentle and comfortable holy light. Duque was simply the perfect combination of an angel and a devil. This kind of devastation was far greater than what her father had done to her mother. She remembered asking her mother, "Since you're so afraid of father, why did you give birth to me and Nefarian?" Sinestra replied, "A weak dragon that can't beat me down is not qualified to be my spouse. Although I'm reluctant, since Nethario has the ability to bite my neck and press my dragon head to the ground, I have the obligation to give birth to his children. This is the rule of the Black Dragon clan." Onyxia suddenly understood her mother's feelings. Perhaps this was what it meant to be conquered. However, she, the noble Black Dragon princess, was pressed down by a human. What the hell was this? Onyxia's mind was in a mess and she had no idea what to do. In the darkness in the distance, the light of torches began to appear. Duque realized that it should be the night watchman from Night Town. After he became the lord of the eastern part of the Twilight Forest, he had strengthened the organization of the Night Watchmen. Most of the Night Watchmen were veterans who had retired from the first and second battle of the Dark Portal. They were quite skilled. Duque didn't want to trouble them, so he directly projected a phantom and explained the situation to one of the Night Watchmen. Duque looked around and picked up Onyxia, whose clothes had long been torn into strips. He took out a spare mage robe from his storage bag, wrapped it around her and left. He couldn't go back to Stormwind City immediately. Duque wanted to open a magic transmission to tell Jaina and the others that he was safe, but looking at the trembling Onyxia, Duque suddenly felt a headache. Duque directly opened the portal to Karazhan. As soon as he came out of the portal, Duque saw a petrified ghost mage. Khadgar, alright, Duque had almost forgotten about his existence. Now it seemed that this guy was still very dutifully helping him take care of Karazhan. Wah. Beloved master. Although I know you're very busy and don't have time to take care of your mage tower, you shouldn't give me such a big fright the moment you come back. Khadgar looked left and right at the trembling Onyxia, who was wrapped in the mage robe behind Duque, with an expression that said, "I understand." Duque's face was red and he gave the reins to Khadgar. "Find a place to hide her. Don't let her escape and don't believe anything she says. Other than the minimum amount of food and medical supplies, don't give her anything. Understood?" "Understood. If His Majesty Proudmoore asks, I'll tell him that you hid a dragon as an experiment material." Chapter 11:28. Karazhan was very big. Not to mention hiding a person, it would not be a problem to stuff half of the dragon's slumber temple inside. After a few turns, Duque brought Onyxia to the huge astrological hall that should have been where the Nether dragon was. "You stay here." "Wait." Without giving the princess of the Black Dragon a chance to argue, Duque stuffed her in and quickly put the most powerful compound seal on the space to prevent her from escaping and to prevent anything from coming into contact with her. Now Onyxia had finally given in. Submission was a far cry from obedience. Obedience was a far cry from deference and a far cry from complete loyalty. This wasn't a game and Duke couldn't see the loyalty. Moreover, the Black Dragon race's talent was in scheming. Duque did not dare to be careless at all. After quickly dealing with Onyxia, Duque finally dared to answer their magic messages. "Duque, are you okay? If you're not dead, make a sound," Servanas shouted nervously. In front of the magic mirror of the Storm Stronghold, the Alliance and Horde bigwigs who were concerned about Duque were all speechless. What the hell was this? It is indeed Duque. Jaina shrugged. "Duque, I'll deal with you when you come back." Queen Sylvanas was a little mad. In the mirror, Duque looked wronged. "You told me to make a sound if I'm not dead." "You're in the right." On the surface, she looked angry, but everyone could hear the surprise in her voice. Soon, Duque opened a portal and returned. "What's the situation? Did you let her escape?" Bolvar was the most nervous and the first to rush up to ask. It was not just him. All the bigwigs in the Storm Stronghold were extremely concerned. Many of them had participated in the siege organized by Duque. Obviously, everyone knew that not every time would have a good ending. For example, the last time they ganged up on Arthes, he was forcibly rescued, leaving behind endless trouble in the future. Duque smiled. Although I suffered a bit at the hands of Enzos, I didn't let you down. With that, Duque swung his arm and threw a sword that looked like a machete to Valera, who was nervously following behind Varian. She subconsciously grabbed the handle of the weapon and was a little confused. This is... Duque had a smile on his face. Viscolo the bloodletting. It's yours. Valilla examined the sword carefully, her face showing an expression of ecstasy. This was an era where epic equipment had yet to become commonplace. As a slave gladiator, Valera would normally be lucky to possess an excellent weapon. Now that she had obtained a relatively high-tiered epic weapon, it was definitely a pleasant surprise. Seeing his companion's ecstatic expression, William was a little dumbfounded. Valera, I remember that you don't specialize in combat, right? Shut up. From today onwards I'm a combat thief. Valera's scolding made William a little resentful. It was impossible to buy an exquisite weapon even if one wanted to. In the eyes of a powerhouse who was used to living a poor life, changing his fighting style for a weapon was a very normal thing. Vanessa, who was at the side, patted Valera's shoulder. Do you know the benefits of following my master? Do you want to jump ship and join the Marcus family? Valera quickly hid behind Varian and made a face at Vanessa. Seeing that Duque had begun to divide the spoils as usual, everyone's faces were filled with joy. The space bag Anixia's pouch was distributed, along with Ring of Imprisonment, Death Collar, to the powerhouses who had participated in the Battle of Mount Hygel. These items were all very valuable. But to the new powerhouses who had just joined for the first time, this was a feast to upgrade their equipment. Bolvar actually wanted to ask about the evil magic at first, but he understood after seeing Duque's expression. Reginald stood beside Bolvar. Although Duque has all kinds of small problems, he has never let us down when it comes to big things, hasn't he? Looking at this old friend who had worked with him for more than 10 years, Bolvar smiled. That's right. Even though one was a direct subordinate of the late King Lang, and the other was a vassal of Duque, they still became good friends just like in history. After dividing the spoils, it was time for the main event. William, please ask the other one to come out too. Let's meet everyone together and put an end to this conspiracy. Under Duque's command, the other William also came out. The two kings had exactly the same faces but had completely different auras. Anyone would be shocked. Two kings. How is this possible? Either my eyes are deceiving me or the world is deceiving me. The nobles and officers discussed among themselves. In front of hundreds of nobles and high-ranking officers of the kingdom, Bolvar announced the cause of Valentine's Day. I'm sorry, this is all the doing of the evil black dragon Onyxia, who disguised herself as the human Countess Katrana. As the Prince Regent, it is my dereliction of duty that I did not notice this. But before I'm held accountable, may I trouble the Regent Duke Marcus to cast a spell and restore His Majesty Rin. Duque walked forward and looked at the twin kings. He said seriously, back then you were hit by a very evil ancient magic. It directly split your souls. To be honest, it is very difficult and very painful to fuse your souls again. If you resist the fusion, there may be irreversible consequences. Have you thought it through? Yes. He is me and I am him. We are all William and we are not complete without either one of us. As Rogosh, William had the most decisive personality, and his answer was the most resolute. I'm actually afraid. The timid William's answer made Duque frown. But his next words made Duque and the others feel relieved. But we all have the same love, our Tiffany, our child Andoin. In order not to cause trouble for them, I am willing to give up this lowly self and fuse again. After the timid William finished speaking, the bastard Duque's mind was tainted. All right, one husband turned into two, cough cough. Duque nodded and collected his thoughts. He began to cast a spell. This was the recovery spell that he knocked from Onyxia's hands. Long before she completely surrendered and was willing to become a mount, she had handed over the spell first. If it was a normal Breaking Dawn mage, he would not be able to do it. This was because it involved the repair and recasting of souls. Fortunately, after spending time in the Burning Legion, Zhou's ability to control souls was definitely the best among mortals. Chapter 1129. Zhou softly chanted a draconic incantation. You are the same existence on the soul scale. You have the same weight, the same texture. You come from the same source, the same mother. Under the watchful eyes of hundreds of nobles, the two Varians stretched out their hands and held each other's fingers. Gradually, their entire bodies began to turn into specks of light and disintegrate. Then the beautiful silver-white glow began to converge and form a human figure. From this moment onwards, the farce between the two kings ended. Varian Rin was once again the one and only king in the world. Varian, Queen Tiffany rushed forward, caressing her husband and scrutinizing every detail of his face. Tiffany had once worried herself to death about losing herself and being a yes man. Now everything was fine. Her young and heroic husband had returned. The two of them became one, and Varian also regained his memories. At the same time, he also had the unforgettable memory of the ghost wolf Rogosh. He had many things to tell his lover, but in the end, thousands of words were stuck in his throat. All he could say were a few words, I'm back. The king and queen of Stormwind passionately kissed each other in public. This, of course, won the cheers of the entire audience and the most enthusiastic applause. That's right. The backbone of Stormwind had returned. After the farce was over, Bolvar dropped a heavy bomb. Our most beloved king has been turned into a puppet by evil magic. The evil Countess Katrana and Risto took advantage of the situation and almost stole the power of the kingdom. No matter what, as the regent, I have failed in my duty. From today onwards, I resign from my position as regent and ask for punishment from His Majesty. For Dragon Yu. Varian was a little dumbfounded. Before Varian could continue speaking, Bolvar knelt on one knee and continued, Your Majesty. Merit must be rewarded and mistakes must be punished. This is the principle of a good king that cannot be shaken. Your Majesty, please confiscate all of my fiefs as an example. This move of Bolvar's was beyond everyone's expectations. In the next moment, everyone realized Bolvar's decisiveness. Think about it, the king had been split apart by magic, and Bolvar was merely guilty of not investigating, yet all of his territories had already been confiscated. What should be the punishment for those nobles who collaborated with Xianxia to force the abdication and persecuted Zhou? The crime of treason was unavoidable. In that instant, Zhou understood Bolvar's good intentions. Zhou bowed and said, Duke for Dragon is right. Merit will be rewarded and mistakes will be investigated. I have the title of regent, but I haven't really assisted His Majesty for so many years. I have also failed in my duties. I ask His Majesty to allow me to resign as regent. Duke's action was a classic example of returning power. The abdication of the two regent kings at the same time meant that William, who had regained his sense of self, could finally show his power. At the same time, this was to wipe out all the pests and nobles and nail them to the pillar of shame. William turned around and said in a deep voice, I understand the efforts of the two regents. I thank the two Grand Dukes for their continued service to me and to Stormwind. I hope that the two of you can assist me in the future. I'm still young and there are many things I don't understand. Please do your best to teach me. As for those degenerates, as long as there is concrete evidence, I will definitely sentence them to death in the name of William Rin. The wrath of the Emperor would result in millions of corpses. This was not an exaggeration. As the king, once he made the final decision on this matter, there was no room for maneuver. Tomorrow there would probably be a massacre. That had nothing to do with Zhou anymore. Zhou closed his eyes gently. Perhaps the 21st Valentine's Day of the Dark Portal would be named Bloody Valentine by future generations of historians. But so what? Stormwind had rotted and surgery had to be performed to remove the rotten flesh. Only then would there be a chance of rebirth. Otherwise, if it continued to grow, no matter how lush the tree looked, it would only end up rotting internally and eventually collapse. It was late at night, and the impact on Stormwind and the entire Alliance and Horde had not ended. The aftermath would continue to ferment after daybreak. Zhou did not care how far William could go. In a sense, this was also a test for William. If William failed, Zhou would also re-examine his relationship with William, and even the entire Stormwind. Phew. After leaving the meeting hall of the Storm Fortress, Zhou let out a long sigh. It's over for tonight. Just as he turned his head, he was shocked to find himself surrounded by a large group of women. Although they were all in battle attire, thanks to the Azeroth style, the ranger's attire was just a three-point style with a cape and long boots. It was very pleasing to the eye. Duque swallowed his saliva. What's the matter? The surrounding outsiders had long been sent away. Queen Sylvie directly hugged Duque from behind. Hey, we don't want to discuss with you whether Onyxia is dead or not. We also don't want to care about the smell of Fatinia on your body. We just want to remind you. The remaining 6 women said in unison, the night of Valentine's Day is not over yet. Duque's throat gurgled. Alright, you guys have the final say. Of course. Aurelia and Sasha directly held on to Duque from both sides. You said that for the safety of the king and the people, we had to use Valentine's Day to lure the princess of the Black Dragon out. We all listened to you. Now that it's over, it's time for you to fulfill your duty as a lover. Alright, the following story tells everyone to never underestimate the persistence and craziness of women for special holidays. Poor Duque was directly dragged away. Before he was engulfed by the vortex of passion, Duque looked up to the sky and shouted, I'm not afraid, I still have the blessings of the Red Dragon. The queen, the female general and the priestess said in unison, hee. Just nice. Curtains, red candles and a revolving bed. Countless Mount Hyjal. The Mariana Trench that could never be filled. Whose scabbard was this? Whose killer weapon was this? Duque was completely dumbfounded. But he could not lose. If he lost, his path as a conqueror would end here. Although the land of gentleness could easily become the grave of a hero, Duque was still a little unwilling. The passion hidden under the priestess' holy face could not defeat Duque. The conqueror game made up of real queens could not stump Duque. Even the sisters well made up of 3 sisters could not defeat the great demon king Duque. The first glimmer of dawn appeared. Looking at the faint morning sun outside the Duke's mansion in Stormwind City, Duque struggled to climb out and swore in his heart. *CKU. Why are there so many holidays? What Valentine's Day, Chinese Valentine's Day, 5/20/11, hand-chopping day, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and you still have to remember the anniversary of our acquaintance. Isn't it better to have holidays 365 days a year? How can people live like this? Those with girls hurt their kidneys and wallets. Those without girls still have to eat dog food on the streets. Nonsense. I, Duque, have decided that Azeroth can forget about these holidays in the future. Chapter 1130. Brother Duque, I won't be able to see you again for a long time. Can you leave a mark on me so that I can reminisce about you at night without you? Kalia begged Duque softly. No problem. Duque replied energetically. System Elf. Host, I just detected a slight decrease in your humanity, moral integrity. Did something happen? Duque carried Kalia's white thigh and used 999 consecutive godly sword stab while replying resolutely, nothing. The Alliance and the Horde defeated the evil Black Dragon Princess Onyxia and saw through the conspiracy to overthrow the Alliance. They then punished the fallen nobles who were in cahoots with the evil. This result was worthy of celebration. William did not disappoint Duque. Not only did he execute most of the nobles who were in cahoots with Onyxia, but he also returned Duque's territory. Together with Bolvar and Duque, he reformulated the rights and duties of the nobles. He took back the right to station troops and tax, as well as prohibited the local nobles from privately passing local laws. All local laws had to be applied to Stormwind City first, and only after they were approved could they be implemented. While William was strengthening the royal authority, he also began to draft the Constitution of Stormwind. Not only did it have regulations for the people and nobles, it also started to restrict the unlimited extension of the royal authority. Drafting a constitution was not something that could be done in a day. It was just that in the new constitution, the concept of permanent autonomy for Duque's territory was formally proposed. Duque deliberated for a long time before deciding to agree. Historically, the territory that Stormwind controlled was not large. Nominally, the kingdom had 4 large territories: the Elven Forest, the Reedridge Mountains, the Twilight Forest, and the Western Wilderness. In reality, other than the Elven Forest, which was better controlled, the other territories were not stable. The Western Wilderness was the territory of the Defias Brotherhood. Outside the various farms were the territories of bandits, beasts and murlocs. Now, after Duque's management, it had become 1,000 miles of fertile land. It was the core of the kingdom. After many years of management by the Marcus family, the Riedridge Mountains had become a private territory. At the same time, the surrounding knolls and other messy forces had been wiped out. The Twilight Forest was no longer scary after the construction of the East-West Railway. All the ogres had been wiped out, especially the Vogger Ogre Mountain. It was now one of Stormwind's most important mines. Coupled with the recent expansion of Stranglethorn Vale, it was no exaggeration to say that the territory of the Stormwind Kingdom was much larger than it had been in history. So, even though East Elwyn Forest, East Twilight Forest and Riedridge Mountain had become Duke's territory, the kingdom's territory was still huge. However, the most shocking thing was that William insisted on giving the Marcus family the title of King Candidate Family. William said, "When Stormwind City fell 20 years ago, the late King Lang was already in despair. He had long made a vow in his heart that if anyone could help the Wurine family recover Stormwind City, he would not be ashamed to see Wurine's ancestors after his death, and he would be willing to share the power of Stormwind Kingdom with that person. In fact, Father had always been prepared for you to establish your own kingdom." But Uncle Duke Marcus did not give up and chose to be loyal to Stormwind. You did not change your mind in the face of despair and desperation. To be honest, the Rin family has nothing to repay you. Please join our royal family. If the bloodline of the Rin family is cut off, please lead the people of Stormwind. Duque considered William's request for a long time and finally chose to accept it. There were many things that could not be solved by forbearance. With the power but without the corresponding status, things would often go wrong. There was only one condition for Duque to agree to join the Stormwind royal family. Before the bloodline of the Rin family was cut off, the Marcus family would only be a Grand Duke. This represented respect for Lang, who had raised Duque. The alliance and the horde temporarily returned to peace and quiet. Unfortunately, even such a situation became very short-lived. On the 18th of February, a new piece of news shocked the entire horde. According to the report of the alliance's commander, Duque, a large number of remnants of the Blackrock clan were found in the Blackrock Tower between the Burning Steppes and the Scorching Canyon. The troll chief Wujin, who was still a guest in Stormwind City, sent out a messenger under Duque's suggestion. He made a request that all members of the horde thought was normal. He hoped that the scattered Blackrock clan would return to the horde. Regarding this matter, Wujin even negotiated the conditions with the alliance represented by Duke. The horde used minerals in exchange for the alliance's green light to let the remnants of the Blackrock clan pass through the alliance's territory and send them to the Kalimdor continent. Because in Wujin's view, the Blackrock clan, who lacked resources and food, could not survive in the resource-poor Blackrock Tower. The situation was as Duque expected, but it was far beyond Wujin's imagination. The messenger came back in the form of a corpse. The head of the messenger sent by the horde was cut off, the brain was dug out and the brain was made into a wine vessel and sent back. Only a piece of animal skin written in orc language was nailed to the messenger's head with a fine black iron dagger. "I, Rend Blackhand, am the true chief of the horde. Starting with the despicable and cunning Orgrim, you self-proclaimed great chieftains have stolen the power that belonged to my father's Black Hand. Now the time for retribution has come. In the name of the world's strongest Black Dragon King, Rend Blackhand, the only mortal ruler under Nefarian, I declare that the Horde has 3 months to launch an attack on the Alliance. And I admit that I am the only chief of the Horde." Seeing this, whether it was Wujin, Kane or Grom, none of the tribal chiefs could stand it any longer. They stared at the messenger. Until the last moment of his life, there was no fear on the messenger's face, only endless anger. Grom broke the dagger that was forged from black iron with one hand, letting the dark red blood flow down his palm. "Rend Blackhand, I, Grom Hellscream, swear that I will make you pay with your life. I will make your body into a specimen and nail it to the gate of Orgrim forever, so that every Horde citizen will spit on your filthy soul." The leaders of the Horde rushed back to Orgrim as if their butts were on fire. Looking at the angry faces of the chiefs, the leaders of the Alliance could only sigh in admiration. Duque silently took away the model of the Blackrock Tower from the military map. "Although it's a bit unkind, I think we can temporarily ignore the Blackrock Tower and Nefarian's Blackwing's nest. Now let's talk about Molten Core. Chapter 1131. In the conference hall, as Duque's maid and assistant, Solarian began to distribute the reports to the Alliance's bigwigs. Almost every bigwig frowned when they saw the reports. Duque explained, the attacks have become more frequent since last autumn. If it was just the orcs, the Marcus family's private army and Dan Maluo's border guards would be able to teach them a lesson. But please note the proportion of fire elemental creatures. Dwarves were mostly impatient. Magni was already knocking on the table. Duque, come to a conclusion. Duque smiled bitterly. I estimate that the Flame Demon King Ragnaros will launch an all-out attack on Stormwind City and Iron Furnace Castle in July at the latest, in the middle of summer. Turalian frowned. Ordinary soldiers can't fight fire elemental creatures at all. No, it should be said that even we can't fight against those large elemental creatures. I remember that the Flame Demon King has a Baron Geddon under him. Surely. Magni interrupted, don't look at us. Even dwarves with a full set of protective gear can't swim in the lava river. No. There's a kind of protective gear that can do it. Duque suddenly clapped his hands, and the door of the Storm Guard General's conference hall suddenly opened. At the gate there were 3 dwarves who looked a little uneasy standing there. Hey. It's the Dark Iron Dwarves. Dark skin? Magni blew his beard and stared. After all this trouble, the solution was in the hands of his mortal enemy. Magni, as the dwarf king who always boasted that he was the strongest craftsman in history, couldn't do it, and had to rely on his mortal enemy's help. This was a bit funny. Big brother. Why do I feel like you're a bit of a failure as the strongest craftsman? Bu Lang whispered to his big brother in a low voice of about 100 decibels. Pfft. Kalia couldn't help but burst out laughing. With the first one taking the lead, the rest of the queens and female generals all laughed wildly. Even the more experienced soldiers like Mograine had a hard time holding it in. Being shot in the back by his own brother, Magni had no regrets this time. Magni punched his brother directly. Alright, dwarves were just that direct in expressing their feelings. Duque ignored the emotional exchange between the bronze-bearded dwarven king brothers and began to introduce the 3 Dark Iron Dwarves. They belonged to a neutral Dark Iron Dwarf organization, the Thorium Brotherhood. With Duque's explanation, everyone finally understood. The Thorium Brotherhood was formed by a group of extremely talented Black Iron Dwarven craftsmen and blacksmiths. They were one of the most outstanding miracles of Azeroth. They had the knowledge to create the equipment and weapons of the Flame Lord Ragnaros, but they lacked the manpower to obtain the necessary materials. Now that Duque had contacted them, they agreed to sell the legendary Dark Iron Dwarves equipment recipes. After the 3 Dark Iron Dwarven craftsmen left, Turalian raised his doubts. Is their formula reliable? Duque replied, Ragnaros' lair, the Molten Core, is a fiery hell. Mortal armies are pointless there. If we want to eliminate this scourge, we can only send a group of heroic powerhouses to fight him. In that place where even the frost element is extremely thin, even Breaking Dawn wizards can't hold out for long. We have no other choice. But I believe that His Majesty Magni's knowledge will help us verify these equipment recipes. Magni, with a panda eye, puffed out his chest and sucked in his stomach. In the end, everyone laughed again. Duque turned and pointed to a place on the military map. Ronan, go to Azhara. This is on a small island in Azhara near the Endless Sea. Look for a water elemental creature called Duke Hydraxis. He can represent the Hydraxian water elemental army. Legend has it that these water elemental creatures are the mortal enemies of Ragnaros and his army. Ronan nodded. Understood. The one who understood the enemy the most was the enemy, and the enemy of the enemy was one's friend. This was an unchanging truth. It was definitely beneficial for the Alliance to go there. After that, Duque put Bulang and Reginald in charge of dealing with the Blackrock orcs that came out of Blackrock Mountain. He turned to Turalian. Turalian, I want you to lead a 10-man heroic party into the Molten Core. It's to scout the way and also to prepare materials for fire-resistant equipment such as Magma Core and Blazing Core for the frontal attack. Won't it alert Ragnaros? It's unlikely according to the Thorium Brotherhood. As long as you don't attack the Lord Tier monsters. The unintelligent molten giants and molten hounds are like weeds in the ground. There's no way to kill them and no Lord-tier monster will care. Turalian immediately understood his mission. Then I'll collect materials near the entrance. At this time Mograine asked, Onyxia, what happened to her? Duque's expression was a little interesting. He rubbed his nose awkwardly. This should be considered a seal. I have complete control over her now. But the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza wants me to subdue her. Since Nesario's death, the position of the Earth Guardian has been lost. This has caused the effectiveness of planet Azeroth's magic formation to weaken, indirectly holding back the power of the Dragon Slumber Shrine. Duque decisively pushed the blame. Although this was the truth and the policy of the Dragon Slumber Shrine, it would take at least 5 years for another dragon to succeed as the Dragon Slumber Shrine's guardian. It's not easy for the Dragon Slumber Shrine either. The more they learned about the supernatural forces above the mortals, the more the Alliance felt that they had a great responsibility. After the military meeting, when Duque's lovers were ready to travel to the Molten Core, Duque finally made time to return to Karazhan. How's Onyxia? Duque asked Khotgar. The ghost mage shrugged. According to your status, you won't let her out until you're dead or alive. These days she scolded you 256 times, and then begged you 1024 times. Duque blinked. What was this? But no matter how many doubts he had, it was nothing compared to seeing it with his own eyes. Going to the astrology hall, Duque found that his magic shield and seal was still quite intact, except for the dozen or so void worms outside the shield, which were rather disgusting. Asterisk swoosh swoosh swoosh. Asterisk a series of magic missiles took care of the void worms, which were probably at the level of a Morning Star wizard. Duque entered the magic formation. Unexpectedly, as soon as he closed the door, Duque heard a rustling sound. As soon as he turned around, Onyxia was already close to him. For a moment, Duque thought she was going to stab him or something. What greeted him was only a pair of fair arms that were as white as lotus roots. She was trembling. Chapter 1132. What's going on? If someone told Duque that the princess of the Black Dragon Onyxia was actually a timid person, Duque would be the first to not believe it. A timid person wouldn't go deep into the enemy's territory to play dirty tricks. Her father, Nesario, had snuck into the Alliance and died, but she was still doing well in Stormwind City. Onyxia was definitely a ruthless character who took the unconventional path. But at this moment, what Duque saw was a tear-stained face and her eyes were wandering. Her gaze flickered as soon as it came into contact with Duque, and when Duque didn't respond she had no choice but to look at him again. The plump and soft dragon's peak had already turned into a round pancake under the pressure, and was stuck to Duque's chest without any gap. Duque could even clearly feel the pulse of the dragon's heart. That was the sound of a panicked and disorderly heartbeat. What's wrong? My little mount. Duque had a thought-provoking expression on his face as he teased in a frivolous voice. Mount. This humiliating term had obviously triggered Onyxia's nerves. For a moment, Duque thought that she was going to transform into her dragon form and bite him. Duque was even prepared to activate her soul reins to give her an unforgettable memory. But she clenched her fists tightly, her entire body tensed up, and even a small portion of her pearly white teeth was exposed. Then, like a deflated balloon, her entire body softened, and the tears in her eyes suddenly flowed out. You know it. You did it on purpose. 20% hatred, 20% anger, 30% pleading, and 30% emotion that even the princess of the Black Dragon herself didn't know. When she said this, her arms that were wrapped around Duque were trembling, and her eyes that were staring at Duque were full of pleading. If Onyxia's surrender a few days ago felt like she was being forced to submit to him, the current Onyxia gave Duque the feeling that she was 70 to 80% willing to submit to him. Why was it like this? Suddenly, the spatial crack connected to the astrology hall moved. After a series of wave-like tremors in midair, a few void worms crawled out and began to gnaw at the protective barrier in vain. The magic array that Duque had personally set up couldn't possibly be destroyed by a magical beast of this level. What happened next made even Duque feel a little annoyed. These worms, which looked to be the size of a calf, used their ring-shaped mouthparts full of sharp, thumb-sized teeth to gnaw at the magic shield. At times there was a grinding sound and at other times, it sounded like nails scratching against glass. These voices sounded quite vexing. Onyxia cried and begged, "You're threatening me. If I don't listen to you and dare to play tricks behind your back, you'll throw me to those disgusting lowly creatures, right? You won't even let me die. Every time you let them gnaw on my body, you use your holy light to heal my injuries, right? Don't lie to me, I know. Congratulations, my master, your plan has succeeded. I'm no match for you, I'll be obedient, don't let me stay here anymore." In his heart, Duque was dumbfounded. In all honesty, Duque had never thought of doing this. After regaining his rationality, Duque thought about how to find a safe place to lock up the princess of the Black Dragon without letting her escape. At that time, if he still didn't reply, Jaina and the others would go crazy. Only a ghost would have the thought to set up such a clever psychological torture trap. In the process of training Onyxia, this could be considered an unintentional surprise. It was much better than the result he had intended. Dragons had extremely tough bodies and strong vitality, and it was very difficult to hurt or even kill a dragon. On the other hand, the overly tough bodies of dragons made regeneration very troublesome. Duque glanced at the system notification and found that after so many days, Onyxia's vitality had barely recovered to 2%. It was not wrong to say that she was still in a dying state. Any creature's willpower would easily decline when they were seriously injured, and dragons were no exception. Just like how he had locked her up in the Celestial Hall, which was equivalent to a prison, and had let the Void Worm torture her mind. This was Duque's unintentional action. He did not expect this to be a fatal blow to Onyxia. If he had used all kinds of torture on her from the start or kept increasing the intensity of the torture after the first time he tamed a dragon, the result would most likely be that the greater the pressure, the more intense the resistance in her heart, and in the end she would fiercely rebel. Of course, there was another result, which was that Duque had completely broken her mind. In any case, there would not be this docile and obedient Onyxia. Duque could not help but think, next, should I use both carrot and stick and not just be good or bad to her? What about training an evil dragon? Duque was also clueless. Apart from telling himself to think of a way to be immune to those 7 damned sins, in the end he still had to clean up his own mess. Since he could not kill Onyxia, he could only walk this path of slightly evil training all the way to the dark. The actor Duque's expression was non-committal, and there was even a hint of evil charm. Oh, so smart. So, will you really be obedient and not rebel anymore? Onyxia was about to answer, but Duque's index finger pressed against her red lips. I don't want to hear those meaningless lies. Your disguises and lies cannot fool me. If your answer does not satisfy me, I will change to a more interesting place for you. I will bring you to a more interesting place. Duke's tone was light, as if he was chatting with her about his daily life. The more it was like this, the more frightened this female black dragon, who was very good at playing tricks, became. She, trembling, raised her head with great effort and looked into Duque's eyes. I won't rebel anymore. When she said this, her voice was still very loud, but she immediately lowered it and added, probably won't rebel? Duque's smile became even more charming. Onyxia hurriedly raised her right hand, and her index finger and thumb seemed to be holding an air bean. Probably. The probability is so small. Really. I'm already telling the truth, don't punish me anymore. The Black Dragon Princess's tears flowed down like a waterfall, and she no longer dared to look at Duque. Like a little kitten seeking warmth, she curled up in Duque's arms, her body trembling. Well said. Looks like I'll have to give you a reward. Duque suddenly carried Onyxia in a princess carry. When the princess came back to her senses, she was already in a warm room. There was a blazing fireplace and a soft and clean fluffy blanket. Duque's voice sounded again. A mount should look like a mount. Onyxia nodded meekly. Chapter 1133. After the dragon-taming whip visited the dragon's cave again and figured out the depth and twists of the dragon's cave, Duque finally had a detailed and in-depth understanding of his exclusive mount. After riding Onyxia once at night, Duque cast holy light and fed her a large amount of good meat, bringing her HP back to 10% in one night. The next morning, Duque decided to ride her again. Pippi Dragon, let's go. Duque sat on the huge black dragon's neck and swung the soul reins. Onyxia instantly turned her head and rolled her eyes at Duque. However, those yellow vertical pupils that were bigger than water basins no longer had that fierce and vivid light. In the end, she sighed helplessly and flapped her huge wings. The black dragon princess injuries were still very serious, and there were many holes in her wings. She almost lost her balance when she took off. Unlike in human form, at least the wounds on the surface had all healed. The black dragon princess in dragon form still had many wounds that were shocking to look at. This was done on purpose by Duque. Anyway, no matter how long Onyxia had been in human form, she still believed that she was a dragon. The wounds on her dragon body allowed her to recognize her situation even more clearly. Thus, she was unconsciously willing to make more concessions in human form for the sake of survival. But wasn't concessions in human form still concessions? Perhaps she could still deceive herself on the surface, but what about in her bones? With one hand holding the reins and feeling the breeze brushing past his face, Duque felt great. I'm not riding some nameless common young dragon of the dragon clan. Either I don't ride or I just walk. I don't ride a mount. If I'm going to ride, I'm going to ride the best. Only a boss dragon like Onyxia is the mount that I dream of riding. After circling a few times in the sky above Karazhan, it felt good but a little slow. Duque took out a long whip used by beast tamers from his storage pouch, and with a snap he lashed out with the whip, hitting the black dragon's butt. As a boss-level black dragon, Onyxia definitely had thick skin and tough scales. The dragon's body did not feel anything from the whip. But the psychological shock was the most profound. Her whole body stiffened and she almost fell from the sky. For a moment she almost wanted to fall to her death together with her bastard master, Duque. Unfortunately, wizards were the least likely professions to fall to their deaths, let alone Breaking Dawn wizards. If the dignified black dragon princess were to fall to her death, she would be too ashamed to face her ancestors. Although she did not have the face to see her dead father now, she could only imagine the day she would be rescued when she thought about how Alexstrasza was captured and almost turned into a mount. Now that she was under the control of the black dragon soul, and had handed over the soul reins, she could only imagine the day she would be rescued. Well, she actually didn't have much hope. After all, her brother Nefarian had never taken her seriously. The relationship between the black dragons had always been cold and indifferent. After being whipped a few times by Duque, no matter how unwilling Onyxia was, she could only endure her grief and anger and try her best to speed up. Riding a dragon and riding a griffin were essentially the same. Dragons were bigger and smarter. They could sit more stably and they could do whatever they wanted with a sole command. This was really incomparable. Duque had originally wanted to slay dragons, but he had accidentally become a dragon knight. This could only be said to be fate. After flying around the upwind trail for about 10 rounds, Duque called out to Onyxia, "That's enough, let's do this for today." The black dragon's huge wings flapped gracefully in the air, and its huge body slowly descended onto the platform of Karazhan. The Saintess of Chastity, Khadgar, and a large group of Einherjars looked at Duque and Onyxia with complicated gazes. After lowering her neck to let Duque jump off, the black dragon princess used the ultimate transformation spell and returned to her human form. She was still rather weak. After returning to her human form, her legs gave way and she staggered. Duque quickly caught her. "Are you all right?" Facing Duque's gentle greeting, Onyxia's body trembled. She shouted in her heart, "Don't be fooled, Onyxia. You are the great and proud black dragon queen. I can't let these small favors move you." However, in her state of not recovering from her injuries, her body and mind were very honest. She could almost immediately feel that her weak body seemed to have some warmth, as if she had some strength again. Onyxia's face blushed slightly as she lowered her head and replied, "I'm fine. Rest for a while. Come to my room at 2 in the afternoon. I have something for you to do." Understood. After eating the large amount of lunch that Khadgar had brought, she lay on the bed and stared blankly at the ceiling. She felt that if it was her previous self, she would probably be venting the anger in her heart and destroying everything around her. Unexpectedly, she did not have such thoughts at all. Was it because her injuries were too heavy that she no longer had such thoughts? Was it because her heart was tired? Or was her body and mind already beginning to fall? Her mind was in a mess, and she did not dare to continue imagining. Unknowingly, the time had come. What kind of punishment and torture was waiting for her? When she arrived at Duque's room, Onyxia saw that the sky and floor were covered with clothing blueprints, as well as half-made clothes and a large amount of fabric. Please help me be a model today. Because a certain transmigrator was determined to take all the gold coins from the purses of the noblewomen. Therefore, this world also had two programs, Storm Fashion Week, and the Queen's Secret Underwear Show. It was precisely because the models always wore beautiful new clothes that attracted the attention of the noblewomen, coupled with the policy that there was never a second set of the same style, that the noblewomen would spend a lot of money in one go. Of course, everyone knew that the inventor of the new style of women's clothing was also fucking Duque. Even when Duque was missing, the Marcus family still relied on the blueprints that Duque left behind to make a lot of money. She didn't expect that Duke would ask her to be his model today. Catwalk. Raise your hand. Put your left hand on your waist. Turn around twice and see. Duque was like the most professional tailor and designer, ordering Onyxia around. After a busy afternoon, she didn't feel anything, but after dinner that night, when Duke presented her with some new clothes that were as beautiful as the heavens, Onyxia suddenly felt a sense of enchantment. It seems that, following Duque was not bad. The reward for being a model was new clothes. This was indeed intentional by Duque, and it unexpectedly had a miraculous effect. In theory, it could slowly remove the guard in Onyxia's heart, but the speed was absolutely beyond Duque's expectation. That night, when Duque went to Onyxia's room, he found that she was trying on new clothes. When taming the dragon again, Duque could clearly feel Onyxia's passion and cooperation. Chapter 1134. The advantage of the system elf was that the things that existed in Duque's memory before, even if Duque himself had completely forgotten them, as long as they existed in the depths of his memory, the system elf would be able to dig them out. The system elf would be able to dig out the Milan Fashion Week's new product launch that he occasionally caught a glimpse of on television. The system elf would also be able to dig out the Swarovski man-made crystal ornaments that he had seen on the roadside. The stingy Duque could not bear to give Onyxia real diamonds. Duque casually made a batch of glass ornaments that were specially made to trick people, who knew that it was as if a magical switch had been opened. With the small rewards of new clothes and fake diamonds, the Black Dragon Princess was obviously more cooperative with the training. Even if she made a mistake and was spanked by Duque with a board, she would cry and accept it willingly. What was even more amazing was that she still retained a faint resistance and a strong sense of shame. She still refused to put a collar on her dragon neck. The reins only symbolize that I have been conquered and lost my freedom. The collar represents that I have lost myself and become a brainless thing like a dragon. Make your choice, my master. No matter which one it is, it does not mean that I have given up the choice to resist. The only difference is which one has a smaller probability. Onyxia said stubbornly. Duque patted her head, but in the end he did not put the collar on her. It was purely because Onyxia's reigns had more historical significance. More than a month had passed. It was April 2nd, 21 years after she stepped into the dark portal. For Onyxia, the previous life of scheming against each other, toying with the human nobles in the palm of her hand, creating conflicts and chaos everywhere, and being free and unrestrained had slowly become a blur in her mind. She did not know when it started, but she had gotten used to this kind of restrained life. She had to work hard for a little benefit that she would not even look at in the eye in the past. She constantly worked hard to meet all kinds of novel requests from Duque. From time to time she would fail because of her clumsy actions or because she did not know what to do, and she would receive all kinds of shameful punishments. She clearly knew that the noble dragon race should never lower their heads to Immortal, but she had unknowingly gotten used to calling him master. She even had to think for a few seconds to realize that her master's name was Duke Marcus. This kind of thinking made her both sad and helpless. It was not that she did not want to resist. As the days passed, her physical condition also improved. Many times, Duke was like a defenseless idiot, like a walking dessert walking right in front of her dragon mouth. As long as she opened her mouth, she would be able to tear him into pieces. He recalled the scene where Duke was bitten to death by her in the Twilight Forest and immediately revived. Although she subconsciously thought that it was a very high-level illusion, and as long as she bit Duke's real body she would definitely be able to kill him, but after thinking about it she found that she was more and more unwilling to try to resist. What she didn't expect was that not only was she not disgusted by her current state of life, but she also felt that it was natural and even enjoyed it. Why would I be willing to stay in that dirty and tasteless nest in Dustwallow Swamp for thousands of years? With this thought in mind, Onyxia seemed to be walking further and further on the path of no return as Duque's exclusive mount. During this time the Horde organized an assault team of 3,000 people and began to attack Blackrock's Spire from the Scorching Canyon through the Dwarven territory. It was an assault team that included almost all the powerful chieftains of the Horde except for Thrall. According to Vanessa's report, the Horde should be attacking the upper level of Blackrock's Spire where Rend Blackhand was. Turalian's material harvesting team was progressing smoothly. According to the blueprints of the Thorium Brotherhood, they now had enough materials to make a set of fire resistance equipment for warriors, steel set, and 2 sets of fire resistance armor, leather armor and plate armor. According to Duque, the warriors responsible for fighting the Lord tier monsters in the Molten Core needed higher fire resistance. However, for other professions, 3 sets of fire resistance equipment were usually enough. When he heard that Duque was preparing to launch a crusade against Ragnaros in 3 days, Turalian expressed his concern. The Molten Core is terrible. In that kind of high-temperature situation, not to mention fighting, just staying there would make it difficult to breathe. I haven't brought a team more than 2,000 steps away from the entrance. Now that the fire resistance equipment is not enough, it's not good for us to launch a crusade. Duque shook his head. We don't have much time. It's the Horde's duty to take down the traitor Rend Blackhand. But I'm afraid that the Horde will fail. Even Grom, the leader of the Horde, will not be able to win against Nefarian, the current Black Dragon King. What about the fire resistance equipment? Turalian asked. Duque pursed his lips. I'll ask Magni to bring an anvil and other materials. Once we have enough materials we'll start on the spot. Alright. You've always been right. I hope you'll be the same in the future. Duque patted Turalian's shoulder. I'll leave the dark portal to you. I'll try my best. In fact, Turalian had the same concerns about the Dark Portal. The Wormrest Shrine had recently informed them that the Burning Legion had begun a new round of attacks, and it was very likely that they would forcefully break through the Dark Portal. The crux of the matter was that the Alliance only had so many powerhouses. The Flame Demon King Ragnaros was not a nobody. If the Alliance did not mobilize more than 80% of their powerhouses, they would just have to wait for Ragnaros to turn the entire southern continent into a fiery purgatory. Sending Turalian, who could take charge of an area, back to guard the Dark Portal was already the Alliance's limit. Turalian, who understood the severity of the situation, subconsciously tightened his grip on Quell Zerum. This action was noticed by Duque. Duque hesitated for a while, but still handed a magic flare gun to Turalian. What's this? What cloud-piercing arrow is this? What I need now is a heroic powerhouse to help me, not an army. Turalian joked. Duque was a little embarrassed. The flare gun was Duque's invention. When Duque popularized the flare gun, his slogan was, "One cloud-piercing arrow, an army will meet." Anyway, at the last moment when you really have no other choice, just use it. Turalian rolled his eyes. Don't tell me that you actually enslaved a demon lord and then told me to use the demon lord to deal with the demon lord. This time it was Duque's turn to roll his eyes. It's not convenient for me to bring this guy to the Molten Core in Karazhan. But these guys all have their own problems. All right. Don't worry, if the demon wants to enter Azeroth through the Dark Portal, it will have to cross over the bodies of me and 100,000 soldiers. Chapter 1135. On the 5th of April, Duque led the elites of the Alliance into the Blackrock Pagoda. Their goal was the exact opposite of the Horde's. Instead of going to the upper levels of the Blackrock Pagoda, they headed straight for the Molten Core. With Vanessa leading the way, Duque immediately opened a teleportation door for the heroes to go straight to the Blackrock Abyss. Magni, the dwarf warrior, took the lead and the others followed closely behind. They swept through the path guarded by fire elementals and entered the Molten Core. In order to avoid provoking the lords of the Molten Core, they didn't open a teleportation door leading to the Molten Core. Now that Duque had entered, he opened a teleportation door leading to the Mirror Lake. However, Duque, who wanted to keep in touch with the outside world, soon disappeared. The high temperature of the lava world gave birth to new fire-type monsters almost every second. For example, there was a lava giant that was at least 5 stories tall guarding the entrance. As long as the lava giant was killed for more than 2 hours, a high concentration of fire element would gather, and new monsters would be born from the lava as if it was predetermined. They continued to devour and fuse with each other until a new elite-tier giant creature appeared and once again occupied this empty territory. What was more troublesome was that this was the molten core. All the monsters didn't just rely on their eyes to sense their enemies. As long as they weren't pure creatures that belonged to the fire domain, they would all be attacked. A thief's stealth was useless here. The high concentration of chaotic fire elementals in the air cut off all possible magic communication. We have to believe in Duque. He has led the Alliance through so many crises and this time is no exception, Turalian said. This wasn't based on any facts or reasoning. It was definitely a form of worship, but the Alliance soldiers believed in it. As if stimulated by the allied tribes attacking the Blackrock Mountain together, a large number of Blackrock orcs began to pour out from other secret exits of the Blackrock Tower. Like rivers flowing into the sea, they gathered into an army of more than 50,000 people. Under the leadership of Mame Blackhand, they counterattacked the mountain tunnel and the stone dam path connecting the Scorching Canyon and the Danmore area. At the same time, they crossed the barren land and invaded the Lochmoden area. Bulang Bronzebeard began to lead the mechanized dwarven army, teaching Mame that dead orcs are the best orcs at one point. Still, as the hordes of black whelps and draconic whelps joined the fray and the Griffin Legion from Eagle Nest Mountain stood against them, Mame was forced to retreat. The battle fell into a stalemate. On the other side, thousands of fire elementals began to pass through the Blackstone Path in an attempt to break into the Stormwind Reedridge Mountain region. With the help of the Dalajan mages, Windsor barely managed to maintain the battle line. The most crucial part of the war was the watch castle that was monitoring the Door of Darkness. There was no evidence that the current Black Dragon King was in cahoots with the Burning Legion. If anyone said that there was nothing fishy going on, Turalian would be the first to deny it. Almost at the same time when the two major forces of the Blackrock Spire attacked the Alliance from 2 different directions, the Door of Darkness suddenly moved. A green horizon suddenly appeared in the air. It was completely different from the barren Crimson Cursed Land, but it seemed to be of the same origin. Because it was the ravaging of the dark powers that turned the southern part of the Swamp of Sorrows, which was filled with pests and snakes, into a barren land. The Alliance was no stranger to this shade of green. So when the green line appeared, the patrolling hippogriffs and night elf knights immediately noticed it. Seeing the red fireworks that shot into the sky, the entire watch castle rang with the most shrill alarm. In just 30 seconds, the first batch of 18 Griffin Knights on duty had taken off, assembled and pounced towards the Door of Darkness. They were the eyes of the Alliance and also the blade of the Alliance's counterattack. 5 minutes later, all the cannons on the front line were manned by dwarf cannoneers. 10 minutes later, more than 10,000 soldiers from the Mixed Defense Corps were in position at the first 3 lines of defense. This was the result of a long period of ultra-strict training. Today this result was verified by the Burning Legion. Almost at the same moment the Door of Hell opened, more than 1,000 cannons of various sizes roared at the first line of defense closest to the Door of Darkness. Looking from the sky, the Alliance's formation looked like a pair of golden wings unfurling. The ground shook violently as the dark metal cannonballs shot into the air like lightning, and according to the most accurate shooting parameters obtained through countless practice, they headed straight for the target. It was a standard carpet bombing that had been carefully calculated. The 1,000 cannonballs rained down and created a terrible storm in the midst of the Burning Legion's army. The demons in the center of the storm were torn to pieces, but even the Apocalypse guards that were flying in the air were blown away by the aftermath of the explosion. 20 seconds later, only the most powerful elite demons were qualified to groan on the ground. The slightly weaker demons were immediately disintegrated into countless pieces like butterflies in a storm. In the second round of bombardment, the Type 3 shell, which was specially aimed at the enemy's air force, directly blasted the remaining Apocalypse guards down, and the cannons that were aimed at the ground repeated the previous steps to annihilate them. Everything went smoothly until a demon lord that was 5 stories tall came out of the door of darkness. It flapped its huge black wings and hovered above the watch fortress. The eyes that were like burning green torches were filled with a kind of coldness that belonged to the ruler of all living things, looking disdainfully at the entire world. It coldly stared at the Alliance's cannons below, and the pair of terrifying eyes looked down on the area 3 times. This huge demon lord flapped its huge bat wings, and instantly, countless black light arrows poured down like a heavy rain in May. When the black light descended, the entire area was plunged into a sea of black fire. "Bastard! Come at me if you dare." Turalian angrily waved, Quell Zerum, and kept shooting golden light arcs at the demon lord, trying to provoke it and make it land on the ground to fight him. Unfortunately, after the demon lord sneered, it nimbly dodged the high-speed holy golden light and continued to focus on expanding the area of the sea of black fire. Due to the problem of mobility, there was no chance of winning with the ground force against the air force, not to mention that the enemy was deliberately ignoring Turalian. Turalian, who was helpless, decisively shot the cloud-piercing arrow that Duque had given him. Even Kudrin would have a hard time dealing with a demon lord in an aerial battle. Is it really possible to summon an army with just one cloud-piercing arrow? Turalian felt that it was a bit ridiculous, but he was still trying his best. He was not disappointed. Just 3 minutes later, accompanied by a distant dragon's roar, a huge black dragon shadow approached the watch fortress at high speed. Turalian's jaw almost dropped to the ground. F***ck. What the hell is this? Chapter 1136. After inheriting the royal sword Quell Zalum, Turalian's personal strength had risen to the peak, but he still gave everyone the impression that he was a wise general. This was because he was born at the wrong time and there was still Duque who was even more powerful in battle above him. But it was true that he rarely cursed or lost his composure. This time he really lost his composure. In fact, it was not only him, even many of the Alliance's high-ranking officers could not believe their eyes. Kudrin, who was riding the Griffin King's Scarlet in the sky, felt depressed for the first time, muttering, "Duque, you're a bastard. How can I boast about being the Alliance's #1 aerial knight in the future?" The black behemoth flying at high speed from afar was almost the size of a bunker, and the flowing flames under its wings were like a cloud of fire. The turbulence it set off carried with it a blazing golden light as if it was a blacksmith. As it swept through the sky at high speed, it seemed as if it had been set on fire, drawing a long continuous line of fire. The Alliance's warriors in the watchtower were surprised by its size and power, but the big shots in the Alliance who were familiar with it were more concerned about her identity. After all, less than 2 months ago many people had just fought with her to the death. On the ground, a captain of the Dalajan Wizard Legion raised his head and stared at the hole in the black behemoth's wing. Although the hole had begun to heal and become smaller, its location would not change. "Oh my god. That's the Black Dragon Princess Xianxia, right?" Xianxia? A blood elf ranger in charge of protecting the captain was stunned. "Isn't she the protagonist of Bloody Valentine? I heard that she has been sealed by Sir Marcus." "Why? Is she wearing armor? And it's the emblem of the Marcus family?" "Yes." Xianxia seemed to have followed in her father's footsteps, installing a lot of high-strength mithril armor on her body. Of course, this was not because she had gone overboard like her father and almost self-destructed, and was forced to use high-strength alloys to fix her body to prevent it from falling apart. This was purely because Duque saw that her injuries had not fully healed. So before he left, he used the metal stored in Karazhan and made her a set of armor with mediocre craftsmanship to cover her unhealed body parts. That's right, she was the army of thousands that Duque had handed over to Turalian. As if it had heard the whispers of the guards on top of the watchtower, its glistening yellow vertical pupils swept across the watchtower. In the next second, the huge dragon mouth let out a furious dragon roar at the guards in the direction of the watchtower. Roar. Tens of thousands of soldiers subconsciously shrank back, and some of the more timid ones even closed their eyes, waiting for the terrifying dragon breath that might descend. However, there was nothing. Xianxia seemed to shout out of boredom, and then without looking back she directly approached the demon lord that resembled Kazakh in the air at high speed. To unfamiliar species, other races all looked the same. As someone who had fought against Kazakh before, Turalian knew that this guy wasn't Kazakh, but a third-rate apocalypse lord. And the only thing that guy was proud of was his ability to fly. Seeing Onyxia approaching, the guy panicked, and the first thing he opened his mouth was a paragraph of dragon language. Wait. The Burning Legion has an agreement with your brother Nefarian. Who knew that Onyxia would become even angrier, and she replied in the common language. Bastard. When I was being tortured by Duque, where was my good brother? Besides, he is him. I am me. After saying that, regardless of the consequences, she continued to approach the Apocalypse Lord at high speed. Since the ancient war 10,000 years ago, the dragons and the Apocalypse Guards of the Burning Legion could be said to know each other very well. In a pure one-on-one aerial battle, the flexibility and mobility of the dragons of the same level were definitely above the Apocalypse Guards. The Apocalypse Guards could only rely on numbers. This Apocalypse Lord was in trouble, and in one breath, it shot out a huge cluster of shadow arrows. Then a scene that left everyone dumbfounded happened. With her equally huge body, Onyxia put on a good show of God's evasion. Her long neck and streamlined body were like a snake, weaving through the shadow arrow rain at high speed, occasionally taking one or two shadow arrows, but she did not seem to mind at all. In the blink of an eye, Onyxia had already passed through the Apocalypse Lord's 3 consecutive shadow arrow volleys and arrived behind the Apocalypse Lord. Don't look down on the Burning Legion, the Apocalypse Lord shouted. No. I'm just looking down on you, the Black Dragon Princess coldly said. Burning with flames, the huge beheading sword that was at least 2 stories tall slashed out an arc of light in the void. Onyxia responded by breaking beautifully in the air, dodging the attack with her upper body. Then the terrifying dragon tail that could split mountains and split rocks was like a meteor hammer, drawing a black arc in the air and smashing into the back of the Doomsday Lord at an even faster speed. Ugh! The Apocalypse Lord whimpered, and then turned into a cannonball, crashing into the empty space less than 100 meters in front of Turalian. Well done. Turalian and Kudran said in unison. The Apocalypse Lord seemed to be very clear about the strength of his land battle. Ignoring his dizziness, he shot a bunch of shadow arrows in Onyxia's direction, then tried his best to flap his wings and fly away. Just when Turalian and Kudran had not arrived and the Black Dragon Princess was temporarily avoided, a golden pillar of fire descended from the sky and landed on the Apocalypse Lord's head. A domineering, majestic and sonorous female voice rang out, "Evil shall be purified." Such an exaggerated sacred fire? Turalian turned his head in shock. A huge portal had just opened on the edge of the battlefield, and then a female giant that was at least 3 or 4 stories tall, wrapped in holy light, came out of the portal. She had just raised her huge palm. Turalian knew who she was. She must be the Saintess of Karazhan that Tyrion and Gavin Rad had mentioned. Turalian was overjoyed. He raised his divine sword high and shouted, "Destroy evil." Turalian and the Saintess of Chastity formed a perfect joint attack, but Onyxia obviously kept her distance from them. If she did not occasionally attack the Apocalypse Lord who was trying to fly back, one would really think that she was just a bystander. Turalian suddenly smiled bitterly. It seemed that this female black dragon had regarded herself as part of the evil camp. But that was not important. It was enough to restrain the flying demon lord. Losing its only advantage, the Apocalypse Lord's fate was decided. After taking care of the demon leader, the Burning Legion's attack naturally failed. Onyxia turned around and was about to leave when Turalian suddenly shouted, "Wait! The watchtower needs your strength." Chapter 1137. Tisk. No one would have thought that a dragon with a bumpy face full of cuticles could actually make such a human-like expression. It was pure disdain. Turalian immediately felt like he was baring his teeth in pain. If he had a choice, he wouldn't want to beg this unruly princess of the Black Dragon who had somehow become his ally. Unfortunately, this was the Alliance's weakness. The strongest air force was the Griffin, and even if the Night Elves Hippogriphon Knights were included, they were still at the same level. Reality had already proven that they couldn't shake the Burning Legion's Doomsday Lord. Although Turalian really wanted to believe that the Wormrest Shrine's dragon aspect could intercept all the demons, the reality was that there were still demon lords that could fly over. Seeing Onyxia snorting in annoyance and turning to leave, Turalian panicked and shouted. Duque said that if piercing arrow doesn't behave, he'll punish it when he comes back. Hearing the word punish, countless images of taming dragons flashed through Onyxia's mind. She plummeted and looked like she was about to hit the ground. Turalian looked. There was a chance. Since there was a punishment, there would probably be a reward too. Turalian subconsciously deduced. He also said that if you listen to my command, there will be a reward. Reward? I'm the noble and supreme princess of the Black Dragon. I don't care for that bastard of a master's reward. Onyxia pretended to be disdainful and raised her head high, but a few seconds later she squinted her right eye and sent a magic message into Turalian's ears. He really said that? That should be what Duque meant, right? Although a little uncertain, Turalian still nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Absolutely. What is the reward? Onyxia asked. That he didn't say. Turalian had no idea what kind of reward Duque would have. He was a paladin, and paladins could use tactics to deal with enemies, but they couldn't lie to their own people. Saying this much was already his limit. If he continued to lie, it would affect the purity of his holy light. Although he was already the least devout of the 5 silver saints, originally, Turalian had prepared himself for Onyxia's rage. Even if she didn't kill anyone, she would still set fire to a cannon turret or something. Who knew that the Black Dragon Princess would blush? That should be blushing, right? The next second Onyxia stammered, "Very good human, you didn't lie to me. Alright, I'll reluctantly support the Overwatch Castle for a while." Is that even possible? Turalian was a little confused. Alright. I'll prepare it for you right away. The overjoyed Turalian was about to say that he would prepare an empty barn or an armory, but he suddenly remembered that Onyxia could transform into human form and was at a loss for words. By then Onyxia had flown quite close to Turalian. Only now did Turalian notice that there was a saddle-like seat on Onyxia's back, but it was more like a comfortable chair than a saddle. Not only him but many of the high-ranking officers of the Alliance on the ground were stunned when they saw this scene. Soon they could no longer see it because the huge black dragon was rapidly shrinking in their field of vision. In just a few seconds, it had turned into a charming and beautiful woman, Countess Katrana Anristo, who had once almost stolen power in Stormwind. She wore a bright red top that was shaped like a morning glory, a pure white skirt with a high slit that looked like a cheongsam, and a pair of crystal high heels that reflected the light of diamonds. Coupled with the S-shaped posture that she subconsciously took, she was a living model. She was dressed like a catwalk and her aura was more imposing than a queen. Turalian could not figure out what was going on with this woman. Since it's Duque's request, I'll do it, but the benefits that I deserve must not be lacking. First, I want to enjoy the treatment of a king. Secondly, I'm injured and in urgent need of nourishment. Give me 3 whole roasted cows every morning, afternoon, and evening. I want a 3-year-old bull as well as cumin and other barbecue ingredients. A little Bordeaux wine from the Marcus family would be even better. Let's not talk about Turalian, who foolishly treated the Black Dragon Princess, who had been reduced to a mount like an empress. Returning to the Molten Core, Duque was in a dilemma. This was the real world of Azeroth, so the Molten Core was not a dungeon or alternate dimension that could be cleared in a few hours. It was a huge space that existed underground. How big was the Molten Core? When Ragnaros was angry, he blasted the Red Ridge Mountains into the burning plains and scorching canyon of today. Therefore, the size of these 2 areas corresponded to the size of the Molten Core. That's right. According to the System Elf's scan and the Molten Core in his memory from west to east, the Molten Core was at least 2,000 kilometers. This was really bad. Duque had no choice but to lead his team of heroes in this scorching underground world. Hot. I'm dying from the heat. I say, Boss Duke, can't you turn up your cooling spell a little more? Gavin Rad didn't hold back his ridicule. Duque rolled his eyes and wanted to kick him into the lava to take a bath. Gavin Rad screamed and rolled away. Then 10 seconds later he shamelessly stuck close to Roland. It couldn't be helped. Of course, the players in the game would not feel hot, but in reality it was unbearably hot. Near the entrance of the Blackrock Abyss, the air temperature was only around 40 degrees, but it was already unbearable. After entering the Molten Core, the air temperature quickly rose to 70 degrees, and the ground temperature easily exceeded 100 degrees. Even if everyone was wearing 3 or more pieces of fire-resistant equipment to prevent themselves from getting hurt, the problem was that it was still incomparably terrible. The viscous, scorching air felt like they were stirring hot charcoal powder and boiling it into a paste, then pouring it through their noses. It was a nightmare. At the start, the gnome craftsman Gerben was still promoting his new gnome engineering invention, the air filtration mask. Unfortunately, not only did that thing make breathing even more difficult, but it would also be blocked by the thick magma dust floating in the air in less than half an hour. Only a Breaking Dawn mage could easily communicate with the ice elemental plane in the molten core, where the fire element dominated, and direct the ice element here. It was not that a Radiant Moon mage could not do it, but the mana required to use ice magic would be doubled. To maintain their combat strength, Jaina and Solarian could only use arcane magic. Chapter 1138. The only 2 Breaking Dawn wizards in the team became the absolute core of the team. They could expand the range of their ice shield to isolate heat and filter the air to a certain extent. Because Ronan was a generation younger, he was kicked out by Duque to take care of the melee team. The ranged team could only surround Duque in a circle with a radius of no more than 100 meters. It was not that they couldn't go any further, it was just that it was too hot. They were both Breaking Dawn wizards, but the difference between Ronan and Duque was obvious. Ronan had to focus on sensing the ice elemental plane and use his mana as a Breaking Dawn wizard in order to maintain a constant temperature in a radius of 30 meters. It was not impossible to expand it further, but that would use up his mana reserves. This was impossible in order to prepare for the upcoming battle. Moreover, even if Ronan and Duque lowered the temperature to 20 degrees Celsius, the air on Duque's side was fresh and cool, while the air on Ronan's side was still turbid. It was true that Ronan was Duque's disciple. He had thought that he was only a Breaking Dawn and was not that far off from his master. Who would have thought that he would encounter such a situation? A weak-minded person might say that he was an arcanist, but Ronan was clearly not one of them. After all, at the Breaking Dawn level, even if he was not proficient in other elements, there should not be such a huge difference. Ronan chose to humbly ask Duque for guidance. Master, after activating the ice shield, just what is the difference between us? Are there any details about the flow of mana that I haven't done well? Duque looked at the system notifications. According to the air scanning once per second, the current air quality index AQI is 1180. The main pollutant is PM2.5, fine particles. The air quality here is severely polluted, unsuitable for human survival. Ice barrier. Activate the tornado form. Activate filtering function. Adjust frost elements to exchange heat in the environment. Introduce thermodynamic formula. Attach excess water to fine particles to form controllable small-scale rainfall. After reading through the large pile of notifications, Duque could not help but silently mourn for Ronan for 3 seconds. Ronan was undoubtedly a true genius. He could use the human brain to simulate certain things that could only be done by computer systems. Unfortunately, he was still made of flesh and blood. It was impossible to perform such fine operations like a computer. Duque had cheated. The problem was that no one else knew. Duque could only teach Ronan solemnly. This is not a simple application of magic. First, you have to figure out who your opponent is. Temperature. Ronan frowned. No. Simply using the frost element to clash or fuse with the fire element would only achieve an effect similar to Frostfire Arrow. Now, our enemy doesn't just have temperature. Duque wiped his right index finger on Luo Ning's sleeve and raised it up. Everyone could see that it was black. Dust. Luo Ning's pupils shrunk. Yes. No one liked to eat dust. In this environment, inhaling the dust in the lungs was more fatal than the high temperature. My countermeasure was to split my ice barrier into 2 layers, one clockwise and the other anti-clockwise. There might be a better way, but for now I found that this is the most effective way to isolate the dust. Ronan, who had already become the chairman of the Dalajan Kirin Tor Parliament, humbly lowered his head towards Duque. Master, I have learned something. Duque was lecturing Ronan as well as reminding Jaina and Solarian, who were beside him. To many mages, Breaking Dawn is just an increase in power. But in reality, the mana that a Breaking Dawn mage can use is still limited. Since it is limited, we need to maximize the usage of magic within the limited mana. 3 huge clusters of magic rose from Duque's palm, arcane, frost and fire elements. He continuously split, combined, fused and purified the 3 elemental energies. Just this skillful application made the mage's heroes sigh in admiration. The use and manipulation of magic runs through the life of any mystic. From the most basic mage apprentice to the Breaking Dawn realm and even to the demigod realm, it is the most basic but also the most useful. Multitasking and even multitasking is the threshold that you must cross to become a powerhouse. This requires not only talent but also a lot of practice. Understood. A few mages nodded in unison. Especially you, Jaina. The molten core is indeed too much of a suppression for someone like you who specializes in frost magic. But on the other hand, this is also a rare opportunity. If you can successfully use your magic in such an extreme restrictive environment, then there is no place in the world that your magic cannot reach. Jaina nodded solemnly again. Originally, everyone wanted to give Ronan, the chairman of the Kirin Tor Parliament, some face and leave a portion of them to follow Ronan. However, as time passed, who would care so much about that? They all ran to the area covered by Duque to cool off. William sighed. I always knew that Brother Duque was strong, but I didn't expect him to be this strong. In the field of magic, he is without a doubt the number 1 among mortals. William, you don't have to be discouraged. You can definitely become the number 1 in another field. Valilla consoled him. This theoretical female blood elf thief had become William's guard after the 2 Williams merged into one. Interestingly, she didn't pledge her loyalty to Stormwind. She was only loyal to William and his children. The alliance was rather united, with Duque as the core. There weren't any small factions. Unfortunately, due to the formation, the melee fighters had to open up a path at the front and cover the flanks in the rear. In the end, a bunch of muscular men were sent to the outer circle, while the inner circle was mostly filled with beauties. However, most of the beauties in the hero team were Duque's harem. Furthermore, the air in the inner circle was better than the outer circle. Not only did it lower the temperature and purify the air, it could even get rid of the pungent smell of sulfur. At the start, the various queens were still reserved. As time passed, Aurelia and Sasha, who were already openly lovers, naturally stayed to the left and right of Duque. Slightly further away were Jaina, Elugia, Kalia, Queen Shi and Tyrant. No matter how you looked at it, they looked like 7 stars accompanying the moon. Mograine and the other old ministers grimaced in pain at this lineup, but they couldn't do anything about it. If it wasn't for the blazing lava and volcanic ash floating around them, everyone would have thought that Duque was here for an outing and to show off his lovers. Just as everyone got rid of a twin-headed molten hound, they arrived in front of a huge cave, from which an unusual aura was leaking. Chapter 1139. The fire elemental energy inside was so dense that it was almost solid. Almost everyone frowned. Along the way, everyone had seen the rolling lava on the side of the huge stone path. They had dealt with the 2-story-tall 2-headed molten fire hound wrapped in flames, and beaten up the 7-story-tall molten core giant made of high-temperature rocks. However, the cave in front of them was not that high and everyone was still hesitant to go further. It was too hot. That was the temperature where water that fell in would instantly turn into steam. Everyone looked at Duque. Duque rubbed his chin. In his mind, the system was comparing the terrain. The molten core in reality was a completely different concept from the game. This was not a simple expansion of the map in the game. Because of various factors such as volcanic eruptions and lava rivers that constantly changed the terrain, the map in memory was not that reliable. 50 kilometers ago, Duque thought that he had reached the place and sent the first water elemental in. It was not attacked, but it was melted by the high heat. Then he asked Vanessa to scout the way. However, when they entered the lava cave, a small volcano near the entrance suddenly erupted, and the path into the cave was blocked. Vanessa almost fell for it. Well, when she went, she had a full set of thief epic equipment, but when she came back, she was wearing a maid uniform. She used sprinting, while using the tips of her toes to step on the flying rocks like a dragonfly skimming the water. She kept running like a cloud. Woohoo! The terrifying Duke Beastly finally couldn't stand the pure and righteous maid who refused to cooperate with him. Is he going to silence her? Seeing Vanessa, who obviously still had some spare energy when she ran back and even ridiculed him out of habit, Duque was frustrated for a long time. When Valilla came to ask her if she could scout the way next time, Vanessa decisively refused. Please don't mind my words. Taking the opportunity to tease the famous bastard master is one of the few joys I have as a maid. Valilla was speechless. This time, Duque decided to use a different method. Come out, Brand the fireman. A human-sized fire elemental appeared, bathed in flames. Unlike ordinary elemental creatures, this humanoid figure had an extremely distinct human appearance. Not only did it have distinct muscle lines such as an 8-pack, but it also had a distinct facial contour. The moment the pair of eyes opened, almost everyone thought that this humanoid fire elemental creature had its own intelligence. This was because it was actually looking back at every single gaze that was directed at it. But in the next moment, that mechanical reaction made people feel that it was even inferior to ordinary low-intelligence fire elementals. This made everyone say, "Oh," in their hearts. So it wasn't intelligent. Everyone was confused. Duque snapped his fingers and Brand ran into the cave with smooth steps. Jaina asked, "Does this fire elemental have intelligence?" "No. Because if they have intelligence, they can easily be captured and controlled by the other side's commander-tier creatures," Duque replied casually. The mages exclaimed at the same time, "Impossible." There was no other reason other than Brand the Burning Man's movements were too smooth. This was the area of the molten core with uneven ground. Almost every rock that could be stepped on was volcanic rock formed from cooled magma. Although it wasn't rugged, the uneven road was not something that an unintelligent creature could walk on. Without intelligence, it meant that as the master, the mage had to design every movement of his summoned creature. It wasn't just letting it walk. This involved more complicated issues of body balance and so on. A human child had to spend almost a year to learn to walk, and during the countless failed attempts, the human brain was stimulated to form all kinds of complete neural firing, which was how infants learned to walk, which was how they later ran, jumped, and all kinds of other movements. Originally, Duque could have just been a simple reconnaissance fire elemental and just floated into the cave. Why did Duque have to go through so much trouble? Actually, from the moment he opened the wide area ice shield, he had been consciously strengthening his control and application of magic power. Duque was fumbling. He wanted to find a path to the demigod realm. The Breaking Dawn level was far from the limit. If he wasn't a demigod, he had no confidence in dealing with the Burning Legion's general attack in the future. And ordinary demigods weren't enough. Demigods like the Wild Boar God and the Bear God that had been taken care of by the Void Lords were useless. At the very least, he had to reach the level of Cenarius's father, Malorn the White Deer, to shake the scales of victory in the final war. After a certain dragon taming, Duque had asked Xianxia how to become a demigod. In the end, this female dragon who was born a demigod, only said after a long time, "It's fine as long as your dad is a demigod." Nonsense. I'm the second generation of a god, why do I have to work so hard? Duque used the dragon taming whip to teach Xianxia a lesson on the spot. Duque then asked Aegwin and finally contacted the secluded Medivh. Knowing that Duque had already begun to move towards the demigod realm, Medivh was also very emotional. "First of all, congratulations on your achievements today. As your senior, I am also very gratified. I broke through to the demigod realm while wandering the void. Due to special reasons, I can't tell you the details, but I can tell you a general direction that is feasible. Please tell me." Duque bowed his head humbly. "The realm of gods is not as exaggerated as you think. Gods are indeed very strong, but they are also a form of life, so they can be very strong, very weak, or even destroyed. Every path to the divine realm is unique and cannot be replicated." Hearing this, Duque's eyes narrowed. Stepping into the divine realm on planet Azeroth is very troublesome. This is because the easiest and most extensive areas have already been occupied by a few ancient gods, and similarly, the elemental areas already have their own masters. Moreover, the laws of the world of Azeroth have already been modified by the creation titans of the Pantheon. Unless your power is already able to resist the joint seal of so many true gods, you can only find a field that you are most proficient in and does not touch the laws of the titans to break through. Hearing this, Duque had a toothache. Going against the creation titans was undoubtedly putting himself on the opposite side of the dragon slumber shrine. It was not difficult to break the laws of the titans, but it was not easy either. If he had the ability to destroy 4 out of the 5 dragon aspects, the laws of the titans would more or less collapse. If that was the case, Duque might as well rely on the Burning Legion and suck up to the old man Sargeras. Don't clash with the old laws and territories. Find your own path under such circumstances, or else you will be forever isolated from the divine realm. This was Mediva's final hint. Chapter 1140. Of course, the name brand was Du's idea. At the same time, it was also a small hope and experiment for Duque. Since he came to Azeroth and accidentally became a pharaoh, he would have to deal with elements. It wasn't that Duke hadn't thought about killing Ragnaros and becoming a god of fire himself. Unfortunately, humans weren't natural elemental creatures, and he couldn't give up his human body to become a fire elemental. Otherwise, what would happen to his harem of girls? Of course, it was a good idea to see if he could get a piece of Ragnaros's flesh. This fake fireman Brand was Duke's first test subject. Brand wasn't a fire elemental creature in the traditional sense of Azeroth. He was more like a collection of complicated programs. If he wasn't a fire elemental, he would be an NPC. Just like the monsters in the games Duque played before he traveled to this world. It seemed like it could see enemies and react to every object in its field of vision, but that wasn't the case at all. Duque used the system genie to compile a program for Brand. For example, something within a 100-meter radius could be used as a condition to trigger a certain program. In this place, there should only be a special monster that triggered Brand's reaction. Huh? Before driving Brand into the cave, Duque had prepared himself for many things, but this was obviously not one of them. The turbid air was filled with the aura of raging flames, as well as the barbaric aura of the ancient desolate lands. Poor Brand. He only shot a fireball into the cave before it was crushed into sparks by the thing that rushed out. 5 dogs. Duca's voice went hoarse. Right. 5 molten hounds popped their heads out of the cave together. This kind of 2-headed lava monster with lava droplets constantly dripping from the corners of its mouth was disgusting no matter how many times he looked at it. Duque's eyes narrowed into a straight line. From left to right. Alessandro's pulled 2. Gavin Rad, Tyrion and Magni 1 each. Even though the dwarf warriors had short legs, they were unrestrained. Magni let out a yo-ho and charged at the molten hound on the far right. Mograine was the most shameless. With a slash of Ashbringer, 2 blades of holy light shot out, instantly causing the 2 fire hounds to chase after him in anger. Only Gavin Rad and Theon were left. They were the ones who could only run. Gavin Rad was so angry that he shouted, "Boss, Alexandros cheated. I also want a divine artifact." If it was any other place, Duque would have told him that there was no divine relic, but it was the molten core. It was the first place in Azeroth where a divine relic could be found. Not 1 but 2. The first was Thunder's Fury, Blessed Sword of the Wind Chaser. Wind Sword for short. There was once a player with a particularly good character who graduated in 2 weeks. When he walked around Iron Stove Castle with the wind sword, which looked like a cake fork but had lightning flashing in the middle, countless warriors and thieves just wanted to push him into the furnace of Iron Stove Castle and let him be reforged. The wind sword was awesome not because of its own attack power, but because of its despicable, shameless and stackable speed reduction effect. In the original version, a mage would become brainless after being hit by it a few times. A fireball that could be made in 3 seconds would take 30 seconds. Duque didn't know if he could make it in this lifetime, but if he did, it would be something that could greatly disrupt the opponent's magic circuit. The other one was Savra's Hand of Ragnaros the Balrog. This hammer, which emitted a fiery aura from every corner, was also a well-deserved divine relic. Extremely high attack power, coupled with the unreasonable ability to automatically shoot fireballs at the opponent's side, it was extremely overpowered. Of course, no matter which divine relic it was, it depended on the player's character. In the real world of Azeroth, there was definitely no instance dungeon for these people who were envious of exquisite equipment. Therefore it was up to fate whether or not it dropped the key forging items. Divine relic? As the king of the land of fire, Ragnaros should have a divine relic. Duque replied with a smile. This answer instantly made Gavin Rad howl non-stop. Just as Duque was about to say something, he suddenly realized that his fireman brand was killed again. A huge lava arm the size of a two-story building suddenly stretched out from the magma and crushed Brand to death. Then the eyes of the giant floating on the surface of the magma turned and looked at Duke and the others. And it wasn't one giant but two. Molten Core Giant and Molten Destroyer? Duque's expression darkened. The Molten Core Giants weren't afraid. They had killed at least a dozen along the way. However, the Molten Destroyer was difficult. This guy was considered an elite among the Molten Core Giants. Its unbelievably powerful attack power could directly stomp a warrior with poor equipment or insufficient strength to death. Now there were 7 monsters. Even though this team was made up of hero-level bosses and had enough melee professions, they still felt a sense of danger. Magni use Deity's Descent and take on another giant. Alright. Magni's body instantly grew more than 5 times, and his entire body shone with a metallic silver light. After angering the Molten Firehound, this guy intercepted and slammed his shoulder into the 2 giants that were charging at Duque's long-range team. Hey, I'll tank all 3 of them. Duke ignored Magni, who was putting on a pretentious act. Instead he looked at Bran nervously. This fireman, who had been injected with a large amount of programming, relied on the dense fire elements in the surroundings to revive. However, when he slowly regained his form, there was another uproar in the cave. This time hundreds of fire elemental creatures that looked like little demons rushed out. They were Inferno Imps. A single Inferno Imp wasn't much of a threat. At most they could burn the people around them. However, when hundreds of them came together and stacked their own fire rings, even a warrior wearing a full set of fire resistance equipment would find it difficult. What the F***CK? Does this guy really know how to taunt everyone in the area? Duque didn't dare to be careless anymore. He destroyed Brand with one hand and retrieved all the fire elements and programming he had been given. Even so, the hundreds of Inferno Imps were still jumping and rushing toward the team. At this moment, a warrior stepped forward. He was wearing black iron armor and rushed toward the group of Inferno Imps with agile steps that didn't match his burly figure. The 2 brightly colored swords drew countless splendors that belonged to them in the fiery sky. Varian Rin attack. Chapter 1141. The Flaming Imps, Flaming Nova, blossomed on William's body. If William wasn't wearing a full set of fire resistance equipment, he would have become a roasted pig by now. Even so, fire resistance didn't mean fire immunity. William's hair started to burn, which proved that he was still in danger. Varian, seeing that he had charged into the group of Inferno Imps, Veil Era panicked. Unfortunately, she was only a thief. Apart from the temporary shadow cloak that could nullify such a large amount of fire damage for a short period of time, she was completely powerless against so many Inferno Imps. However, William was still crazily slashing and slashing, attracting more of the Flaming Imp's attention with his divine artifact swords. Unlike Varela, who was panicking, Brawl, who was part of the Iron Triangle of Misfortune, threw healing spells like Heal and Rejuvenate at William's head with all his might, just as he had done in the arena that day. All his actions were treating the symptoms but not the root cause. That was because if these hundreds of Flaming Imps didn't die, William would be like a small boat in a stormy sea that could capsize at any time. At this moment, Duque made his move. You guys kill the Molten Destroyer. Duque softly ordered the long-range experts to deal with the giant that had stomped on Magni like a pig being slaughtered, while he focused on dealing with the imps. Ronan wanted to say something but he chose to obey. However, his mind was on the group of Flaming Imps, and he continued to shoot magic missiles at the giant absent-mindedly. Duque snapped his fingers and another existence that was theoretically a water elemental appeared. It was an elemental lady that looked like ice. Her ice-blue lower body seemed to have merged with the waves of ice below her like a skirt. Her upper body had obvious feminine features, but her helmet was long and sharp like a woodpecker's beak, blocking half of her face that seemed to be carved. Embrace the ice, she hugged the air. William, who was fighting back against the Flaming Imps with all his might, suddenly felt the pressure around him disappear. That was because a huge ice coffin had appeared out of thin air, separating him from the Flaming Imps outside. bright flames collided with the extremely cold surface of the ice coffin, blossoming into beautiful but impractical flames. It then turned into a fading spark and was annihilated in the air. The next second. Feel the power of extreme ice. With the Ice Maiden's finger as the center, a strong gust of wind suddenly blew above William's head. At the same time, boundless water vapor crossed the space and surged out from the cracks in the space. It condensed into a dark cloud about 20 to 30 meters in diameter at a height of about 10 meters above the ground. The Ice Maiden's finger lit up, and a ray of blue light shot into the clouds like a thunderbolt. It immediately triggered the dark clouds above William's head, causing a series of rumbling sounds. In the next moment, countless ice arrows the size of pinky fingers rained down from the clouds. The ground under his feet was made of hard rocks formed by cooled lava. Even elite knights wouldn't dare to say that they could smash the ground with a single blow. However, when these ice arrows hit the bare ground, they immediately left bowl-sized holes. One could imagine how terrifying the power of these ice arrows was. This wasn't the end. Immediately after, Duque raised his left hand and spread his fingers. A blue halo immediately appeared on his palm. Without saying a word, Duke flicked his finger to the left, sending the blue ring of light flying out like a flying knife. Then he flicked a second ring of light to the right. Just like that, he continued to shoot out rings of light in his hand. These halos flew in the air to the periphery of the flaming imps, forming a huge ring that surrounded all the flaming imps. No one can stop the avalanche, the Ice Maiden yelled again. From the ice coffin to the ice halo, the entire area had become a snow-white forbidden zone for life. From the ground formed by lava all the way to the top of the rock stratum hundreds of meters in the sky, everything was white. It was as if Noscent's eternal ice and snow had transcended time and space and arrived here, pouring over the heads of the hundreds of flaming imps. In the eyes of the heroes, a snow-white Optimus Prime appeared. After a series of explosions, all the ice shattered into magnificent ice crystals, and all the imps were swept away. Only William was left inside looking around in a daze. William took a slight breath of the icy aura around him and mumbled, "So this is Brother Duque's true power?" "True power? I'm afraid it's more than that, right?" Valilla and Brawl, who were older than William, mumbled as if they were sleep-talking. On the other side, Ronan went all out. His arcane missiles could no longer be considered missiles. It was more like a huge arcane light pillar that directly hit the molten core destroyer's chest. The surging arcane energy continuously destroyed the structure of the giant's body. Less than 20 seconds after Duque eliminated the flaming imps, Ronan, who had gone all out, destroyed the molten core destroyer. The huge body made of lava disintegrated into rock fragments that could not move and fell rapidly into the lava beside the road. Perhaps after a while, the unique environment of the molten core destroyer would breed new molten core destroyers. At least in the short term, there would be no need to worry about its threat. After eliminating the factors that could directly lead to the collapse of the team, the next step was easy. After dealing with the remaining molten core giants, Duque called out to everyone, "Gather the 5 dogs together and let them die at the same time within 10 seconds. Otherwise they will revive each other." This was not only the experience gained from the game. Through the system scan, Duque could clearly see an ethereal energy band connecting the 5 molten core hounds. Unless the molten core hound that had just been killed could be torn into pieces within 10 seconds, the other molten core hounds that were still alive would revive after injecting large amounts of fire elements into their dead companions. Duque's order was carried out. Moreover, Duque, who could see the HP of the molten core hounds, kept using his high attacks to balance the damage dealt to the 5 molten core hounds. In the end, the 5 molten core hounds cried out in pain at the same time and collapsed to the ground. Phew, phew, phew. Everyone was panting heavily. The battle just now had not reached its limit. At least it had given everyone a heads up. Even though many of them had Mount Hydro-level equipment, they could still fail miserably if they were not careful. Jaina asked, "Duque, your fireman and ice woman are very special. They don't seem to have intelligence, but they seem to have attracted the attacks of the surrounding monsters." Chapter 1142. Yes. Duque rubbed his chin and fell into deep thought. Then Duque smiled. If your Theramore had 300,000 soldiers and 1,000 warships, what would happen to the horde? Jaina thought for a while. Probably they would constantly be coveted and spied on. What if Theramore had a huge army of 5,000 griffins? Perhaps even Thrall would have to show hostility towards Theramore. What if the Wormrest Shrine became a subordinate of the Alliance, and all the dragons were stationed in Theramore? How is that possible? Although she said that, the intelligent Jaina had already figured out what Duque meant. There was a limit to any kind of emotion. When fear reached its peak, one would either launch a desperate attack, just like how there were always some people in history who went crazy and charged at the dragons with crude weapons, only to be eaten in one bite. Or one would recognize the fact that this was a power that far exceeded one's imagination, leaving only a sense of awe. Okay, so Duke, what you're doing now, which one are you? Duque pondered for a while. It's hard to say. Perhaps, to a certain extent or in a certain aspect, my creation is better than them, so it triggered their crazy counterattack. Is that so? Duque couldn't be sure. The journey to the molten core was still long, and Duque had plenty of time to verify all this. After destroying 2 groups of molten hounds, 3 very special-looking fire demons, 1 big and 2 small, glided over from afar, wagging their tails. William. Facing an unknown enemy. If you were the commander, how would you deal with it? If William was still the personality of Rogosh's ghost wolf, he would probably have gone up to fight without hesitation. After Duque obtained the magic spell to remove the split from Onyxia, allowing the 2 William to merge back into one and retrieve his memories, William seemed to have matured a lot. In history, William had lost his father when he was young. After Lothar died at the hands of Orgrim, he grew up in an environment without love and care. His wife, Tiffany, had also passed away at this point in time. If it wasn't for Ando and Rin, it wouldn't be surprising for William to become a loner. Now William was relatively calm. After all, Lothar, whom he admired the most, died of old age and not in battle. Moreover, there was Duque, the former minister of Stormwind. Although Duque was only a little more than 10 years older than him, he treated Duque as an elder. William pondered for a while. I will first observe and try to determine what type of monster it is, and then use half of my strength. Duque didn't comment immediately. Instead he asked, what type do you think this commander-level monster is? William took out his binoculars, looked at the boss again and replied, although he's holding a huge blade compared to the giants and dogs we've met along the way, he and his guards are relatively slender. They're a little like the Nagas. Monsters that are closer to melee combat tend to be more burly, so I'm guessing that he and his guards should be spellcasters. If I were the commander, I would pay more attention to spell protection. Duque tilted his head. Hey Magni, what do you think? Whoever treated this seemingly boorish dwarf king as a fool was the real fool. Magni took a sip of the strong liquor in his wineskin and curled his lips. I have no opinion. We can fight however we want. Then he changed the topic and said, however, isn't it what we seniors should do to clean up the mess of our juniors? Duque laughed and turned his head to the other side. Ronan, since William has determined that the opponent is a spellcaster, you should pay more attention. You should pay more attention. I'll leave the magic support for this battle to you. Understood, Master. Ronan nodded. When Duque walked past, Aurelia used the whisper of the wind to ask softly, is it appropriate? It's all right, it's just a lucifron. Duque said it so casually, but this gave Aurelia absolute confidence. Many times, a name represented a very important meaning. If it wasn't for the terrifying War of the Three Hammers 99% of humans wouldn't have known of Ragnaros. No one would have known that Ragnaros had any underlings. The Dark Age, when the ancient gods and elemental lords ran amok in the ancient Kalimdor continent, was before the birth of the most ancient night elves. Even Tyrant had a hard time finding relevant information. Now, Duke was able to call out the name of the monster that was obviously a commander-tier monster. This meant that Duque had absolute confidence. Aurelia's smile quickly spread among Duque's lovers. Perhaps this was her absolute trust in Duque. Alessandro, stay here with me to hold the line. Yes. Although Ashbringer was strong, it consumed too much energy and wasn't good for a long battle. Moreover, Mograine was also starting to age. Even though he was still strong in his 50s, whether he was willing to admit it or not, his stamina was much weaker than when he was young. This was clearly reflected in the system's scan. Fortunately, the 4 silver sages had survived longer than history. Most of them were in their 40s and were still at their peak. Perhaps they were a little old as pure warriors, but as holy knights, their holy light was more than twice as strong as when they were young. Duque was very pleased. The battle started with the 3 Windrunner sisters firing their arrows at the same time. The arrows were clearly shot by the 3 of them, but Lucifron and the 2 guards thought that the 3 arrows were shot by Theon, Gavinrad and Sidon, the 3 paladins, due to their skillful footwork and visual disorientation. It sounded ridiculous, but the common skill of rangers and hunters mislead was just that awesome. Seeing the 3 idiotic fellows split into 3 groups, and in less than a minute the first guard was taken down, Magni muttered, "Perhaps this is what you mean by not good enough, Duque. I feel like this battle isn't challenging at all. It's like torturing those energetic but lacking in combat skills at home. How boring." Duque glanced at Magni's ridiculously luxurious equipment and cursed in his heart. "If I'd known this would happen, I wouldn't have brought so much good equipment for you when we went back to the War of the Ancients." Suddenly, the system genie let out a sharp alarm. On the way they came, a huge commander-level figure suddenly appeared. On the other side, in the distance behind Lucifron, dust rose into the air. Chapter 1143. Duke's pupils constricted in an instant. Not only was he staring at the huge figure, but he also seemed to be looking into the distance through space. He suddenly sighed. It was true that the Alliance's hero team, which had accumulated a lot of top-grade equipment, had a huge advantage over the bosses in the Molten Core. Perhaps an advantage could bring them victory, but they had to admit that the advantage they had now was not overwhelming. If Duque could split open Azeroth with 1 move, destroy the distorted void with 2 moves, and destroy the entire universe with 3 moves, then the Burning Legion and the Ancient Gods would have nothing to do with this world. No matter how strong the hero team was, it would still take a lot of time and effort to deal with these bosses. The prerequisite was that the bosses in the Molten Core would line up for them to kill. Now it seemed that this was not the case. That's right. The Molten Core's territory was bigger than Duque had imagined. According to his original plan, each boss was about 100 kilometers apart. Without prior arrangements, this distance alone would be enough for Duque's hero team to defeat all 10 bosses one by one. At this moment, not only had the second boss, Magmadar, rushed over with a large group of molten demon hounds. The third boss, Gehenna's, who was at least 200 kilometers away, had also rushed over. It would be an insult to the intelligence of Duque and the other heroes to say that there wasn't a mastermind. There was only one person who would do this, Majordomo Executus, who was in charge of the affairs of the Molten Core while Ragnaros was asleep. The heroes at the front could not maintain their focus. They kept looking back to see if Duque had any new instructions. Facing everyone's gazes, Duque's face turned green. Then he suddenly laughed. "That's right. Our enemies aren't idiots. If a group of strong people can't even find out about their underlings in their own territory, then it can only mean that the famous Fire Demon King is getting weaker and weaker." His smile gave everyone a sense of confidence that was almost unfounded. It wasn't because of clear intelligence, nor was it because of a clear comparison of strength. It was purely because of Duque's personal charisma. William suddenly felt an indescribable sense of envy when he saw that everyone had unconditionally trusted Duque based on his battle achievements. He thought to himself, it would be great if I could be like Brother Duque and gain the trust of so many powerhouses, to the point of risking their lives. Brawl, who was beside William, saw through his thoughts and whispered, "Focus on what's in front of you, William. You're younger than him. You have more room to grow. Valilla and I both believe that you will become a greater man in the future." He had to be patient. The alliance was huge and no one could support the entire alliance by themselves. Not to mention supporting a world. The Night Elf Druid's consolation made William feel much better. In a fit of rage, the 2 divine weapon swords turned into 2 streaks of dazzling flowing light, and crazily slashed at Lucifron's second guard. Duque had already given his orders. He first pointed at the huge hound behind Lucifron and said, "Magni, you carry that big dog. Be careful, the Dog King should know, like the puppies. Benedictus and Sally, you take care of the dwarf. Alexandros and Tyrant, do your best to clear the hounds." Understood. The heroes replied in unison. Mograine asked nervously, "What about the fellow behind?" Duque smiled and said, "I'll go play with it." To be honest, be it the Molten Hound King Magmadar or the red-skinned fire demon boss Gehennas, they weren't that terrifying when they were alone. Thinking of the Hound King's group fear and Gehenna's reign of fire, even the heroes would suffer heavy casualties if they were to meet up in such a chaotic situation. This was something Duque didn't want to see. Life and death were inevitable, and Duque couldn't force his will on others, such as dragging back Lothar who had died of old age. However, Duque didn't want to see his old friends of 20 years die in battle because of his misjudgment. As a commander, he had to make all sorts of decisions at any time. Because in times of crisis, making the wrong decision was better than doing nothing at all. When the heroes saw the reserve team break through the crowd and run towards the huge dog-like leader, they began to feel nervous. When they realized that Duke was actually going to face the boss alone, everyone was so nervous that their hearts almost jumped out of their chests. Duque. Sasha's voice was trembling. Duque waved his hand. "I'm fine. I won't die. However, if you guys can't get here in 15 minutes, my invincible reputation will be ruined." "I'll show you in 10 minutes. Sylvanas' strong and gentle face seemed to twitch. Duque noticed that as she spoke, her hand speed had increased by more than 50%. Not only that, but every arrow she shot was like a cruise missile, drawing obvious arcs in the air and accurately shooting into the gap between Lucifron's scales. Lucifron screamed in pain and his fierce eyes turned to look at her. However, just as he raised the huge spear in his right arm and was about to rush at Queen Sylvanas, Theon smashed Lucifron's head with Xianxia. The holy hammer stunned the fire demon leader for a short time. "Your Majesty, don't let it run around, okay? It's hard for us to catch up." The honest Theon almost cursed. Well, Queen Sylvanas was a little upset. Duque flashed past her and patted her on the shoulder. "Don't worry. It's not that serious yet." With that, Duque used Blink and appeared 200 meters away. Queen Sylvanas continued to fire with all her might. This time the Empress Dowager was so angry that she couldn't say a word. Because almost every arrow from Queen Sylvanas brushed past his ear and neck. Even though he was clad in a thick set of epic armor and a helmet, the problem was, it was hard to feel arrows flying at your back all the time. Queen Sylvanas' arrows perfectly matched Theon's every move. The arrows imbued with the power of thunder often burst out at the moment when Theon's hammer was about to hit Lucifron. It wasn't mislead, but it was even better. In Lucifron's eyes, this was a huge boost in Theon's combat power. He had to choose to kill this thunder magic paladin first. The Empress Dowager took the opportunity to look back at Queen Sylvanas, only to see her sullen face as if he owed her 10 million gold coins. Queen Sylvanas was clearly saying, "Are you okay with that?" You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.